Hey there, story lovers. This is Revenger What If, and we're bringing you an epic adventure. What if the Kyuubi Chakra fused with dragon fire and Naruto became the first Dragon-Jinchuriki king? Hit like, subscribe, and let's begin this journey. Chapter 1, Ignition. The ground at the Valley of the End had been breaking apart for the last 3 hours. Naruto didn't notice anymore. When you've been trading blows with a man who can reshape terrain with his eyelashes, you stop cataloging the damage and start focusing on breathing. Left foot. Right foot. Don't fall. Keep moving. Keep hitting. Madara Uchiha stood across the crater from him, and the infuriating thing, the thing that made Naruto want to scream until his throat gave out, was that the man looked bored. "You've been impressive," Madara said, and somehow that was worse than an insult. "For a container." Naruto spat blood onto the cracked earth. "Say that again." "A container." Madara tilted his head, the Rinnegan spinning lazily in both eyes. "That's all you are, boy. A vessel for the Nine Tails. Remove the fox and you're nothing but a loud child with bad hair." Naruto launched himself across the gap. He wasn't thinking strategy anymore. He'd burned through strategy 2 hours ago. What was left was something rawer, the pure, bone-deep refusal to lie down that had been keeping him vertical since he was 12 years old. Kurama's chakra surged around him in a crackling orange cloak, and when his fist connected with Madara's guard, the shockwave turned the nearest waterfall into vapor. Madara didn't move. He caught Naruto's arm and threw him into the cliff face like he was discarding trash. The rock shattered. Naruto hit the water below and sank. "Get up," Kurama said inside his head. The fox's voice was strained in a way Naruto had never heard before, not afraid, because Kurama didn't do afraid, but something adjacent to it. Taut. Like a rope pulled past its limit. "Naruto. Get up right now." "Working on it." He clawed his way to the surface and dragged himself onto a chunk of floating debris, coughing water. His arm wasn't healing the way it should. Madara had done something with that throw, laced it with something, some combination of the Rinnegan's gravity pull and his own overwhelming chakra, and the damage was slower to close than anything Naruto had taken before. Across the water, Madara stepped off the cliff's edge and walked on air like it was a courtesy the universe extended to him. "I've decided to stop prolonging this," Madara said. He raised one hand, and the moon overhead, the real moon, not the Infinite Tsukuyomi sphere, which was currently cracking along its sealed seams 300 miles up, seemed to respond. A pull began, gentle at first, then insistent. The debris under Naruto's feet started to rise. "He's using Chibaku Tensei," Kurama said. "Small scale, but, Naruto, I need to be honest with you." "Now." "You pick now." "I'm running low." A pause. For Kurama, who had been alive for centuries and spoke like he was permanently unimpressed with everything, that pause was enormous. Not empty. But, close. "If he uses that technique at full scale, I don't think I can give you enough to break out of it." Naruto looked at his hands. The orange chakra cloak was thinner than it should have been. Flickering at the edges. He'd known, somewhere in the back of his mind. He'd been burning through Kurama's reserve since the 3rd hour of the fight, and unlike the fox, he didn't have an infinite well to draw from. They'd been pushing each other to the wall trying to crack Madara's defenses, and the wall had pushed back. "You're calculating how much you have left," Madara observed from 30 feet above him. He sounded genuinely curious, the way a researcher sounds curious about a dying specimen. "That's growth. Most Jinchuriki panic." "You're thinking. It won't help, but I appreciate the dignity." "I really," Naruto said, "really hate this guy." "Join the club," Kurama muttered. "It's a very large club." The debris under Naruto's feet lurched upward. He jumped, hit the water, kept his head above the surface, and felt the gravitational pull try to drag him back toward the coalescing mass of rock and earth that Madara was forming overhead. Not the full technique, not yet, but a preview. A demonstration. Naruto pushed chakra into his legs and held position in the water through sheer stubbornness. He needed something. He needed something that Madara hadn't seen, hadn't calculated, hadn't already built a counter for. The man was a chess player who'd memorized every possible game. You couldn't beat him by playing chess better. You had to flip the board. The problem was he had nothing left to flip it with. Naruto. I know, Kurama. No. Listen to me. The fox's voice had changed. Gone from strained to something Naruto couldn't immediately name. Something old and strange and almost reverent, which was so unlike Kurama that it made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Something is happening beneath us. Something I haven't felt in, I don't have a word for how long. Not in my lifetime. Your lifetime is 900 years, Kurama. Before that. Another pause. Before the sage. Before the bijou. Before any of us were split and sealed and made into weapons. Something from the time when the world was just, itself. Before names. Naruto had exactly enough mental space to be confused about that for 2 seconds before the ground at the bottom of the valley exploded. Not from above. Not from Madara's technique. From below, from somewhere deep in the earth's bones, where no jutsu reached and no shinobi had ever been. The water detonated upward in a column of steam and light that wasn't fire and wasn't chakra but was something in between, something that smelled like ozone and old stone and something else that Naruto had no reference for, a smell like the first morning in history. Madara stopped moving. That alone told Naruto everything. In 3 hours of combat, nothing had made Madara Uchiha stop moving. He'd redirected, absorbed, negated, ignored, but he'd never just stopped. He stood in midair and looked down at the column of light with an expression Naruto had never seen on that ancient, arrogant face. Uncertainty. From the center of the column, something rose. It was enormous. It was the largest thing Naruto had ever seen in the physical world, bigger than the Kyuubi's true form, bigger than the Jubi had been when he'd first manifested, bigger than the cliff faces that flanked the valley. It rose and rose and rose, and it was made of fire the color of deep embers, not orange, not red, but the dark red gold of the inside of a flame that has been burning long enough to know its own mind. It was a dragon. But calling it a dragon the way you'd call a wolf felt like calling the ocean a puddle. It was the concept behind every dragon story humanity had ever told, the original shape that all the myths had been trying to approximate and never quite getting right. It had scales that looked like compressed centuries, and eyes, when it turned those eyes toward Naruto, eyes that were amber going all the way down, amber with no bottom, amber that had been watching the world since before anyone was there to watch back. Madara, to his credit, moved instantly. He brought his hands together and the Chibaku Tensei mass reshaped itself, redirected, firing toward the dragon like a javelin of compressed earth. The dragon breathed. The exhale was almost gentle. A single slow breath, like a man blowing out a birthday candle, except what came out was fire from the beginning of the world, and it dissolved Madara's technique the way sunlight dissolves frost. Not with force. With precedence. As though Madara's jutsu had encountered something older than the concept of resistance and simply found it had nothing to push against. Madara landed on a cliff edge, and for the first time in the battle, he was very still. The dragon turned its head toward Naruto. "It's dying," Kurama said, and his voice was very quiet now. "Can't you feel it? It's been dying for longer than any of us have been alive. Sealed beneath the earth. Something sealed it there. Something went wrong a very long time ago, and it's been burning away down there ever since. What just came up is the last of it. The last, Naruto, it's the last primordial dragon. There were 7 at the beginning. This is the 7th. The last." Naruto was treading water in a valley full of steam, staring up at something so large it had its own weather system, and he felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Grief. Not for himself. For the dragon. For a thing that had been burning alone in the dark beneath the earth for longer than civilizations, and had chosen this broken battlefield in this desperate moment to spend its last breath. "Hey," he said, and felt stupid immediately, but didn't stop. "I can see you. You're not invisible, whatever you are." The dragon lowered its head until one enormous amber eye was level with him. Up close, the heat was staggering, not painful, exactly, more like standing in high summer noon, the kind of warmth that gets into your bones and stays there. The eye regarded him for a long moment. Then the dragon spoke, and it didn't use words so much as used the space where words would go, something that landed in a mind fully formed, like a memory from someone else's life. "There have been 3 before you. A king in the time before hidden villages, who used our fire to end a war and was betrayed by his own generals. A woman who ran alone for 40 years with our flame inside her and was never caught but never rested. A boy who died at 16 with dragon fire in his hands and a smile on his face because he was too stubborn to understand that he was losing. They are why I chose this shape. They are why I chose this moment. I have been looking at this world from below for a very long time, and I had decided to simply, let go. Let the fire go out. It seemed right. Then I felt you." Naruto didn't move. He didn't speak. "You are not a hero," the dragon said, and somehow it wasn't an insult, it was the most precise observation anyone had ever aimed at him. "Heroes are made by the stories other people need. You are something simpler and more difficult. You are a person who refuses. I am Ryuketsu. The last. And I have enough left, just enough, to give you everything before I go." "That's not," Naruto started. "Don't argue with me. I am older than argument." Something that felt like amusement, old and dry and enormous, like a laugh heard from the far end of a very long corridor. "Besides, your fox approves." Kurama's voice in Naruto's head was strange, hushed and a little undone, the way someone sounds when they see something they thought was only a legend. "He's right. Yes. I approve. If you're asking." "Nobody's asking me," Naruto said. "You were born into the same choice," Ryuketsu said gently. "A child in a village that feared him. A fox that had been made into a weapon. Neither of you asked to be what you were. But here you both are, and between the two of you, you have held this world together by the edges and refused to let it fall. I would like to be part of that. If you will have me." Madara moved. Of course he did. 3 seconds of meaningful dragon conversation was apparently all he was willing to allow. He came off the cliff like a comet, the Rinnegan blazing, 6 paths worth of power concentrated into a single devastating attack, aimed directly at Naruto. Ryuketsu moved between them. But the dragon was already dissolving, Naruto could see it now, the great form coming apart at the edges like smoke in wind, the centuries-long burning finally reaching its end. The body was going. But the fire was gathering. "Kurama," Naruto said, and he wasn't asking. He wasn't afraid. He just wanted to share the moment with someone who'd understand. "I know," Kurama said. "I know, kid. Open up." The fire came in. It wasn't like absorbing chakra. It wasn't like the Kyuubi cloak wrapping around him, familiar and furious. It was more like someone opening a door in your chest that you didn't know was there, and on the other side was a room you'd never been in but somehow recognized. The fire moved through his coils, through the chakra pathways Kurama had been occupying for 17 years, and it didn't fight the fox's chakra. It met it. They recognized each other at a level below thought or personality or preference. They fused. Not one swallowing the other. Not a dominant and a passenger. Something new, the fox's red gold chakra and the dragon's dark ember fire becoming a third thing that had no precedent, no name in any scroll or story Naruto had ever heard. It bloomed through him from his core to his fingertips, from his feet to the top of his head, and it was the most complete he'd ever felt in his life. Like a sentence that had been almost finished for 17 years finally reaching its period. Madara's attack hit him. The smoke cleared. Naruto was standing on the surface of the water. Not treading. Standing, the way you stand on solid ground, with weight and ease and no effort at all. His clothes were scorched. His hair was loose, the usual spikes had gone wild, fanning out slightly as though ruffled by wind from above. And there was fire around him, not Kurama's orange, not Ryuketsu's deep red gold, but something between, a color that didn't have a name yet, burning in a cloak that rose from his shoulders in two great sweeping shapes that resolved, if you looked at them right, into wings. He looked down at his hands. The fire curled around his fingers like it was curious about them. "Ha," he said. "Not quite the reaction I expected," said a new voice, not Kurama, deeper and older and carrying that impossible quality of speaking from the far end of a corridor, but warmer now. Present. Settled. The second Dragon-Jinchuriki king said, "I'm on fire," and jumped into a river. "I want to note that I consider you an improvement." "He's making jokes," Kurama said, with the tone of someone discovering that their new roommate is exactly as annoying as they feared. "Already. He's making jokes. I'm allowed. I just finished dying." Naruto looked up at Madara, who was standing 40 feet away on a stone pillar, and the Uchiha was looking at him with an expression that, stripped of all its ancient arrogance and cultivated boredom, was simple and pure and unmistakable. He was looking at something he had not accounted for. "The primordial dragons have been sealed for an eon," Madara said, and even his voice was different, stripped down, precise. A man recalibrating his calculations in real time. That one survived. And gave its fire to a Jinchuriki. He was quiet for a moment. "The old texts called that a king's binding." "I don't know what that is," Naruto said. His voice was different, too, not intentionally, not performed. Just different. Like something that had been slightly too tight for years had finally given way. "But I think we're done with your thing." "My thing." "The plan." "The moon." "All of it." Naruto rolled his neck slowly. "You've been building this for 100 years, right? And the whole thing only works if nobody can hit you hard enough to matter." He took a step forward, and where his foot touched the water turned to steam in a perfect circle. "I can hit you hard enough to matter now." Madara studied him for exactly 3 seconds. Then he attacked. What came next wasn't a battle so much as a recalibration of the word. Madara came with everything, the Susanoo rising around him in a blaze of purple chakra, the Rinnegan pulling gravity and matter into service, techniques that had shattered mountains deployed in sequence, each one the kind of attack that would have ended the battle 20 minutes ago. Naruto moved through them. The fire, the new fire, Kurama and Ryuketsu, his fire, wasn't just destructive. It was intelligent. When Madara's Susanoo blade came down, the fire didn't meet it head-on, it curled around it like water around a stone and found the gap in the chakra structure, the seam where the technique was weakest, and slipped through. When the Chibaku Tensei launched again, Naruto was already airborne, those wing shapes extending properly now, actual flight, the fire lifting him in a way that felt nothing like the chakra-enhanced leaps he was used to and everything like what flight was always supposed to be. He hit Madara from above with a strike he didn't have a name for, both fists together, the fire concentrating at the point of impact into something so dense it looked black at the center. The Susanoo cracked. For the first time in the battle, Madara was on the back foot. He absorbed the hit through the technique, let the Susanoo take the damage, and landed hard on the cliff edge, and for a half second, just half a second, there was a gap in his defense. Naruto was already there. He grabbed Madara by the arm, and the fire spoke directly to the man's chakra, and what he said with it was simple and total, "Stop." Madara's eyes went wide. The Rinnegan flickered. Every technique he had active simultaneously stuttered, not cut, not severed, but paused, the way music pauses when someone grabs the instrument. Naruto looked him in the eye from 6 inches away and said, very quietly, "It's over." The techniques didn't just stutter. They collapsed. The Susanoo dissolved. The gravitational fields released. The thing the moon had been building in the sky, the crystalline structure of the Infinite Tsukuyomi mechanism, gave one long groan of stressed chakra and then folded inward on itself, quietly, completely, like a fist unclenching. Madara stared at him. "What are you?" the man said. It wasn't rhetorical. It wasn't dismissive. It was a question, genuine and stripped bare, asked by someone who had lived long enough to think he understood every answer. Naruto thought about it for a second. "Naruto Uzumaki," he said. "From the Hidden Leaf Village. A beat. Also apparently the first Dragon-Jinchuriki king. That part's new. Still figuring it out." Madara said nothing for a long time. Then, slowly, something moved in his expression, not surrender exactly, more like the particular stillness of a man who has built his entire life on the premise that the world is fixed and unchangeable, and has just been shown undeniable evidence to the contrary. It wasn't peace. But it was something that rhymed with it. He closed his eyes. The rest, the extraction techniques, the black zetsu, the particulars of dismantling a century-long plan, took another 2 hours, and Naruto handled it with the same combination of relentless forward momentum and improvised cooperation that had always been his preferred method. He wasn't alone, reinforcements had been fighting at the perimeter, and Sakura's healing kept the worst of the casualties from becoming tragedies, and Sasuke, who arrived in the last hour with eyes that went immediately to Naruto and then did not look away for a very long time, handled the pieces Naruto couldn't be in 2 places for. But it was Sasuke who reached him first when it was actually over, when the battlefield was finally, genuinely quiet for the first time in what felt like weeks. "Your chakra," Sasuke said, and stopped. He had the specific expression of someone who has prepared a very precise observation and discovered upon arrival that their words are inadequate. His Sharingan was active, it was almost always active now. Sasuke never quite trusted his own eyes anymore, and whatever he saw in Naruto's chakra signature was making him look like he'd been told a fact that required him to redo significant amounts of math. "Different now," Naruto confirmed. "That's one word for it." Sasuke looked up at the wings. They were smaller now, closer to the body, more like the suggestion of wings than the full span, but they were still there, still burning. What happened? It was going to be a long explanation. Naruto knew it. There was going to be a debrief, and then another debrief, and then a Hokage meeting, and then multiple other meetings, and at some point someone was going to produce paperwork. But for right now, in the last light of a sunset that had no business being as beautiful as it was over a battlefield this destroyed, Naruto looked at his best friend and oldest rival and the person who had been on the opposite end of every significant moment of his life, and said, "You're going to think I'm making it up." Sasuke's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but in the neighborhood. "You fought a man who could hold the moon in place. Adjust my threshold for what I'll believe." "I like him," Ryuketsu said privately, with the tone of someone making a considered judgment. "Don't," Kurama said. "It'll go to his head." His name was Ryuketsu, Naruto said. He was the last primordial dragon, and he was dying, and he paused. Even now, with the fire still moving through him like warm light through colored glass, it felt enormous to say out loud. "He chose me." Sasuke looked at him for a long moment. The Sharingan spun quietly in the fading light. "Of course he did," Sasuke said, and turned away before Naruto could figure out exactly how to take that. "Come on. Sakura's about to start yelling about the arm if you don't let her look at it." Naruto looked down at his right arm. It had healed, actually, faster than it should have, the new fire knitting the tissue with an efficiency that made Kurama's healing look leisurely. But Sakura would yell anyway, on principle, because she always did, because that was part of how she said "I was worried about you" when she didn't want to say it directly. He flexed the arm. Felt the fire move with it, curious and easy, like it had always been there. Behind him, at the bottom of the valley, there was no trace of Ryuketsu's physical form. The great dragon shape had dissolved entirely. The water had gone still. But there was something at the surface, a shimmering, barely visible pattern in the water, like heat haze in a shape that, if you tilted your head and didn't look directly at it, resolved into scales. An imprint. A proof. Something had been here that the world hadn't seen in an age, and now that it was gone, it had taken all the space it used to occupy and given it to a 17-year-old kid from Konoha who'd been called loud and dumb and disruptive since he was old enough to be called anything. Naruto breathed in. The fire breathed with him. He walked away from the valley and followed Sasuke's footsteps over the ruined stone, and when Sakura saw him coming she did exactly what he predicted. She pointed at his arm with a chakra-lit hand and opened her mouth to begin the yelling, and he laughed, really laughed, the first clean laugh in hours, and the fire sparked warm and golden around him in response, a dragon's laugh echoing a human one, ancient and new and undivided. The world didn't know yet what had happened here. In a day, maybe two, it would begin to understand. There would be seismograph readings from 6 countries showing an anomaly in the valley's bedrock. Sensonin in 3 hidden villages would file reports about a chakra signature they didn't have categories for. Someone with access to the old archives would find a passage, dusty and marginal, about something called the Dragon-Jinchuriki king, and they would read it with the specific cold feeling of a person discovering that a thing they had been paid generously to ensure could never happen had, in fact, just happened. Somewhere, a man named Kagehane was going to receive a report that would make him set down his tea very carefully, and close his eyes, and begin to plan. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, Naruto Uzumaki walked back to his people with dragon fire in his bones and a new voice in his head making sardonic observations about the architecture, and Kurama was grumbling in the background the way he always did when he was secretly moved by something, and Sasuke was walking 3 feet ahead pretending he hadn't slowed his pace to stay alongside, and somewhere in the dark above the valley a single flame hung in the air where the last primordial dragon had breathed its last. Orange gold, deep ember, burning patient and new, and then it went into the sky like a star taking its place, and stayed there. Naruto didn't see it. He was already talking to Sakura about his arm. But Hinata, standing at the valley's edge where she'd held the perimeter for the last 4 hours with her Byakugan activated and her hands steady, saw it. She watched the flame rise and take its place among the stars, and then she watched Naruto come over the ridge, lit from below by his own fire, laughing at something Sakura had said, and she pressed her hands together in front of her chest the way her father had taught her as a child, the old Hyuga gesture for witnessing something sacred. She didn't say anything. She just watched him come. That was enough. Chapter 2, What We Carry. The medic station outside Konoha's eastern gate smelled like antiseptic and cold air, and Naruto had been sitting on the same examination table for 40 minutes while Sakura found increasingly creative ways to express that she was not, actually, panicking. Your cellular regeneration rate is, she stopped. Rechecked the diagnostic seal glowing against his forearm. Rechecked it again. Naruto. Yeah. Your cells are regenerating at approximately 9 times the rate they were yesterday. Is that bad? It's not bad, it's, she pressed her fingers to her own temple. It's unprecedented. I don't have a chart for this. I have charts for everything. I made the charts myself. You have broken my charts. I've broken a lot of things today, he said reasonably. She looked at him for a long moment, really looked, the way Sakura did when she was being a doctor instead of a friend, clinical and precise and stripping everything down to data. Then the clinical expression cracked slightly, and underneath it was something exhausted and relieved and trying very hard not to be either. The fire, she said. It's not hurting you. No. And the wings. Also not hurting me. They're made of chakra. Kurama says they're made of something that used to be chakra and then got complicated. Naruto glanced at his shoulder, where the wing shapes were currently folded close, smaller than they'd been at full extension, barely visible in regular light, just a shimmer of dark gold heat haze that someone not looking for it would probably miss. Ryuketsu says they're just fire being opinionated. Sakura stared at the space over his shoulder. Your new dragon voice is making aesthetic judgments about your wings. He has opinions about a lot of things. He doesn't love the headband. The metal is excessive, Ryuketsu confirmed, privately, with dignity. No one asked you, Kurama said. I was simply, no one asked you. Naruto had spent the walk back from the valley beginning to understand the specific domestic texture of having two ancient entities sharing the space behind his eyes. Kurama he knew his anger and his pride and the particular way the fox went quiet when something mattered to him. Ryuketsu was new, and new in a way that required constant recalibration, because the dragon wasn't hostile or demanding or even particularly urgent. He was just present the way very old things are present, with a weight that made the air around them more real. They didn't like each other yet. That was clear. But there was something underneath the friction that Naruto recognized from his own history with Kurama, the specific tension of two proud, solitary things discovering they're sharing space with something they can't dismiss. It would sort itself out. Everything sorted itself out, eventually. Tsunade-sama is going to want a full report, Sakura said, making notes in a seal pad that was already half full. And by full report I mean she's going to want you sitting in her office for approximately 6 hours while she cross-references everything against every scroll in the Hokage library. I know. And the council, also know. And there's going to be a period, possibly several weeks, possibly several months, where everyone in the village treats you like you're, she paused, searching for the word. Different, he said. I was going to say, a variable they haven't solved yet. But yes. She capped her pen and looked at him straight. Are you okay? It was the first time anyone had asked him that since the battle ended, and it landed differently than he expected. Not the medical version of the question, she'd already asked the medical version 12 different ways. The human version. The one that meant not your chakra, not your cells, not the new fire, you. Are you okay? Naruto thought about it honestly. I think so, he said. It doesn't feel wrong. None of it feels wrong. It feels like, he looked at his hands. The fire was invisible in the bright light of the medical tent, but he could feel it moving in his palms like a pulse. You know when you've been walking with a stone in your shoe for so long you forgot it was there, and then you take it out? Sakura's expression went through several stages. That's how you describe becoming the host of a primordial dragon's fire. I contain multitudes. You contain literally multiple entities, so yes. She snapped her seal pad shut. Go sleep. I'm serious. Your brain needs to consolidate whatever happened today or I'm going to end up with a Dragon-Jinchuriki king who can't form short-term memories. Dragon-Jinchuriki king, Naruto repeated. It was the first time he'd heard it out loud from someone else's mouth. It sounded different that way, more real and also somehow more absurd. That's a title. It's several titles stacked on top of each other, Sakura said. Go sleep, Naruto. He didn't sleep. He sat on the roof of the medic station instead, cross-legged in the pre-dawn dark, and watched the lights of Konoha flicker and hold. The village was awake in the way it got after a crisis, not the usual comfortable midnight quiet, but an alert, breath-held kind of wakefulness, people moving between buildings with that specific purposeful urgency that meant news was spreading faster than anyone had managed to get ahead of it. They knew something had happened at the valley. The censor corps had started filing reports before the battle was over. The shape of what they knew would be fragmented, enormous chakra event, valley of the end, multiple Bija-level readings, unknown element, and they'd be fitting the fragments together in real time, which meant by sunrise the village would have a version of the story that was close to true but missing all the important details. He could see, at the far end of the main avenue, lights burning in the Hokage tower. Tsunade wasn't sleeping either. You're not resting, Ryuketsu observed. No, Naruto said aloud, quietly enough that no one below would hear. He'd been doing this, speaking out loud to them rather than internally, and wasn't entirely sure why. Something about saying the words out loud made them feel more like a conversation and less like thinking it himself. Kurama used to do this, Ryuketsu said. Before he was sealed. Speak aloud to himself in empty places. He'll deny it. I will deny it, Kurama confirmed, from somewhere that felt like a back room, because it isn't true. The fox's sense of shame is really quite endearing. A sound on the roof edge. Naruto didn't turn, but he felt the chakra signature, which these days was like, he was still calibrating the metaphor, like recognizing someone's voice in a crowded room. Not effort. Just knowing. Sasuke settled beside him on the roof's edge with the specific economy of movement that meant he'd been awake for a long time and had decided that being awake was more useful than pretending otherwise. He was still in his battle gear, cleaned up but not changed, and he had 2 cups of something hot that he'd produced from somewhere without explanation and offered one to Naruto without looking at him. Naruto took it. Tea. Strong and slightly bitter, the kind that woke you up rather than comforted you. They sat in silence for a while. This was one of the things about Sasuke that never got explained in any story anyone told about them, how comfortable the silence was now. After everything. After the valley the first time, after the war, after all the iterations of almost losing each other permanently. The silence had weight and warmth and said things that neither of them had ever learned to say properly in words. You fought through to the end, Sasuke said eventually. Not a compliment exactly. An acknowledgement. Even before the dragon. Somebody had to. You were running empty. I could see it from the ridge. He took a slow drink of his tea. I was trying to get through the perimeter faster. The Zetsu formations were, Sasuke. Naruto looked at him. I know. It's fine. I should have been there. You were there for the part that mattered. A beat. You always are. Sasuke said nothing. His jaw moved slightly, the way it did when he had a response that he decided against. Then, tell me about the dragon. What you actually felt. Not the report version. So Naruto told him. Not the way he'd tell the Hokage, not timeline and technique and observable phenomena, but the real version. The way Ryuketsu had felt rising from the deep earth. The quality of the voice. The 3 who had come before. The moment the fire moved in. Sasuke listened the way he listened to things that mattered, which meant completely still and completely focused, the Sharingan not active, just his own dark eyes watching Naruto's face. He said there were 3 before me, Naruto said. Dragon-Jinchuriki kings. All 3 died. How? It wasn't a question about the cause of death. Naruto understood that. He didn't say exactly. But he said one was betrayed by his own people. He paused. The old texts Madara mentioned, he called it a king's binding. Made it sound like it was known. Like it was something people had heard of and were afraid of. Something people were afraid of and had experience managing, Sasuke said, which was a darker reading of the same information, and correct. The Uchiha thinks clearly, Ryuketsu observed, with what sounded like genuine approval. Don't let him know you said that, Kurama said. His head is already a structural concern. Madara knew the term, Naruto continued. Which means it's in the historical record somewhere. Which means other people will find it. He looked at the Hokage tower lights. Tsunade probably already knows. Probably. Sasuke set his cup down on the roof tile. Naruto. The way he said it, direct, no preamble, meant the next thing would be honest regardless of whether it was comfortable. This was another Sasuke thing. He didn't believe in working up to things. You're going to be someone different to people now, Sasuke said. Not just the village. Everyone. You were already a category problem for people who like things categorized. Now you're worse. Some of them will find it inspiring. A pause. Others won't. I know. I'm saying you should be ready for it to be fast. The shift in how people look at you. He picked up his cup again. I have some experience with that particular transition. Naruto smiled despite himself. People looking at you differently. People looking at you like you're something that needs to be managed. The word managed came out like something distasteful. Be ready for that. Don't let them. Were you ready for it? Sasuke was quiet for a long moment. Then, no. But you'll handle it better than I did. You always handle the people part better than I do. It was one of the more honest things Sasuke had ever said to him directly, and they both knew it, so they both looked away from it immediately and drank their tea and watched the village and let it sit there between them, warm and important and unacknowledged in the way that made it more real than any declaration would have. The sun came up over the Hokage faces carved in the mountain, the great stone profiles of the first through the fifth, patient and permanent, and the light hit the village in long gold bars, and when it hit Naruto the fire in him caught it and held it, just for a moment, so that he glowed faintly in the early morning like he was lit from the inside. Sasuke noticed. Didn't comment. Just looked at the mountain. You should know, he said, very neutrally, like he was mentioning the weather, that you look completely ridiculous. Naruto laughed. The morning happened. Reports were filed, medics were debriefed, the first rounds of council meetings were convened with the urgent energy of people who had been given complicated information and were determined to reduce it to something manageable. Naruto attended 2 of them and found them less excruciating than expected, partly because Tsunade ran the first one with the specific terrifying efficiency of someone who has been awake for 36 hours and is running entirely on willpower and unfairly strong sake, and partly because Kakashi, who had materialized at some point like he always did, from nowhere, reading something, mildly amused, had positioned himself between Naruto and the more agitated council members like a very relaxed mountain. The king's binding, Tsunade said at the first meeting, spreading 3 scrolls across the table that she'd clearly pulled from somewhere deep in the restricted archive. They were old, genuinely old, the kind of old where the seal preservation was doing visible work just to keep them readable. Mentioned in the pre-foundation records. Before Konoha, before the founding of the hidden villages. Referenced in 7 separate historical documents across 3 different nations' archives. She looked at Naruto. Do you want the long version or the summary? Summary, Naruto said, because it was 7 in the morning and he'd been awake for 30 hours. A human who undergoes the Dragon-Jinchuriki fusion, a king's binding, achieves a level of power that is, according to these records, genuinely without ceiling. She said it flatly, like a fact about rainfall. Not the kind of without ceiling that just means very strong. The records use the phrase beyond the shape of human limit, which is either poetry or accurate and in either case is alarming. She rolled the first scroll up and opened the second. There's also consistent reference to a group, faction, organization, something, called the Draconis Covenant. Mentioned in 4 of the 7 records. Always in the same context. Which is, Kakashi prompted, pleasantly. They killed Dragon-Jinchuriki kings. She set the scroll down. Every one. All 3 historical cases. The kings lasted between 8 months and 7 years after the binding before the covenant reached them. No exceptions. She looked at Naruto. There's no record of the covenant being disbanded, destroyed, or ceasing to operate. The room was very quiet. Well, Ryuketsu said, in the private space behind Naruto's thoughts. You knew about this, Naruto said. I suspected. And you didn't mention it. Would it have changed your decision? Naruto thought about the valley. The water rising. Madara overhead. The choice that hadn't really felt like a choice because some things you don't decide, they just happen because they're the only honest thing available. No, he said. I know, Ryuketsu said, and there was something in it that wasn't quite apology but wasn't quite not, either. Right, Naruto said, and turned back to Tsunade. What else? Tsunade looked at him for a moment with an expression he recognized from years of being on the receiving end of her particular brand of grudging affection, the look that meant you impossible child, I refuse to stop believing in you. Then she opened the 3rd scroll. The meeting went for 2 more hours. Naruto absorbed it, asked questions, didn't catastrophize, drove 2 of the elder council members to visible frustration by treating each piece of alarming news with the same practical forward momentum approach he brought to everything. It was Kakashi who pointed this out afterward, as they walked out of the Hokage tower into the mid-morning. You're taking this remarkably well, Kakashi said, in that mild tone that always meant he was paying very close attention. Which part? All of it. The covenant. The historical mortality rate among Dragon-Jinchuriki kings. He tilted his head. You're not worried. I didn't say that. You didn't need to. Kakashi looked at him sideways. What I meant was, you're not scared. There's a difference. Naruto considered this. The fire doesn't feel afraid, he said finally. And I've been doing things that scared me my whole life. Being scared was, he paused. Being scared was when I didn't know if I was enough. I don't feel that right now. He looked at his hand, at the barely visible shimmer of the fire. I feel like me. Just more. Kakashi was quiet for a moment. Then he did something he rarely did, he reached out and put his hand briefly on Naruto's shoulder, the way he had when Naruto was 12 and needed steadying, except that now the gesture wasn't about steadying. It was about acknowledgement. Then the Covenant should be worried, Kakashi said, and walked away reading his book like he hadn't just said something enormously kind. Naruto stood in the morning sun and felt the fire warm in his chest, and thought about the word worried, and found it didn't fit. She found him in the afternoon. He was at the memorial stone, not for a specific name today, just because sometimes you needed somewhere quiet that was serious about being quiet, somewhere the weight of things was already built in and you didn't have to manufacture it. He was sitting with his back against it, cross-legged, eyes closed, doing something that wasn't quite meditation and wasn't quite conversation, finding the shape of the new thing inside him, the way you find a new room in a house you've always lived in, moving carefully through it to understand where the walls were. He heard her footsteps and knew them instantly. He'd known Hinata's footsteps since they were children, had learned them the way you learn the footsteps of someone who has always been quietly, steadily present in your peripheral vision. She sat down beside him without a word, which was very Hinata. She almost never announced herself, never made herself an event, just arrived and was there, and you realized after the fact that something had settled in the air around you. He opened his eyes. She was looking at him with those pale Byakugan eyes, and not, interestingly, at the fire or the wings or any of the unprecedented elements of his current existence. She was looking at him, at his face, the way she had always looked at him when she was trying to assess how he actually was as opposed to how he was presenting. I saw the flame go up, she said. After. When it was over. The last of Ryuketsu, he said. Going up he hesitated. Like it was going home. She nodded. She'd understood that without the explanation, he suspected. Are you in pain, she said. No. Are you different? He thought about how to answer that honestly. The same but, he looked at his hands. Kurama always felt like fire that was caged. Like heat inside walls. This is, he spread his fingers, and between them the fire moved, flowing from palm to palm like it had somewhere to be and was in no particular hurry to get there. It's not caged. It's just mine. Hinata watched the fire move between his hands. Her expression was thoughtful rather than afraid, which was so specifically her that it made something in his chest feel warm that had nothing to do with dragons. Kurama was always yours too, she said quietly. I know. But he'd argue about it. A beat. Ryuketsu doesn't argue about it. He tried to find the word. He chose. And choosing means you're already decided. There's no going back. She was quiet for a moment. The memorial stone was warm in the afternoon light, and somewhere nearby a bird was doing something cheerful and oblivious. Naruto, she said. Yeah. The reports from the border sensor teams came in this morning. She said it in the same gentle voice she used for everything, which meant it landed more quietly than it should. 2 separate teams reported unknown signatures. Moving toward the village. She paused. Slow. Careful. Like scouts. He looked at her. Nobody at the meeting mentioned it, she said. I think it was still being compiled when you were in there. But I saw it on the secondary board when I came through the sensor station. She met his eyes. I don't think it's coincidence. Scouts, Ryuketsu said, and his tone had changed entirely, the elderly sardonic warmth gone, replaced by something absolutely level. It begins quickly. Faster than it did for the others. Others had less reason to move fast, Kurama said. The Covenant would have heard about the valley by now. We were not subtle. Were we supposed to be? Naruto asked internally. No, Ryuketsu said. Subtlety was never an option. The binding is felt across great distances by those who know what to feel for. They would have known within an hour. I know, Naruto said aloud, to Hinata. I thought you should know, she said simply. Before the council's version reaches you with all the editorializing. He looked at her. Thank you, he said. I mean it. She ducked her head briefly in that old way, the childhood habit she'd never fully shed, and then lifted it again. Also, she said, in a tone that was carefully neutral, you're glowing. I know. Mildly. Around the edges. Also no. She seemed to consider her word choice. It's not unpleasant. She likes the fire, Ryuketsu said, with entirely too much satisfaction. Do not, Naruto warned him internally. I'm simply noting, I will find a way to make your existence uncomfortable if you don't stop. You can't. I'm inside you. Then I'll be uncomfortable at myself. Ryuketsu made a sound that was the draconic equivalent of laughing and went back to watching in comfortable silence. Naruto shifted to look at the tree line to the north, where the sensor stations were, where something that knew what to look for had already started looking. The afternoon light was coming low through the leaves, and the village was going about its business in the middle distance with the wonderful obliviousness of a place that didn't know yet that something was on its way. How many scouts? He asked. 3 signatures. 2 northeast, 1 northwest. Patient movement. None of them have crossed the boundary perimeter. They're not here to fight, he said. Not yet. He thought about what Tsunade had said, the Covenant kills Dragon-Jinchuriki kings, and weighed it against what Ryuketsu hadn't said but had implied. Every one. All 3. No exceptions. They're here to see what they're dealing with. And what are they dealing with? Hinata said, with genuine curiosity. He stood up, and the fire rose with him, a brief flare that settled back down immediately, easy and patient. Something they haven't seen before, he said. That's what they're dealing with. He said it without performance, without the old bravado that used to precede everything, the I'll definitely win, believe it that had been armor as much as declaration. This was just a statement. A fact he happened to know. Hinata stood beside him and they looked at the tree line together, and in the silence between them the fire moved quietly between his fingers and the afternoon held its breath, and somewhere in the deep dark of those carefully approaching scouts, something registered the chakra signature of the new thing in Konoha's center and hesitated, just slightly, before continuing on its slow and careful path. Good. Let them hesitate. Naruto put his hands in his pockets, the fire obligingly retreating to wherever it went when he wasn't thinking about it, and turned back toward the village, and Hinata turned with him, and the memorial stone stood behind them in the late gold light, patient and permanent, keeping its record of every name that had ever paid for something worth having. He added no names today. Instead he walked, and the fire walked with him, and the village came forward to meet them both. From the northeast tree line, 300 meters beyond the sensor boundary, a figure in a gray traveling cloak paused in the shadow of an old oak. The figure held a device, something that resembled a compass but read chakra nature rather than magnetic poles, and watched the needle spin wildly, helplessly, unable to fix on a category, before landing somewhere entirely off its calibrated scale. The figure lowered the device, raised a hand seal, and sent a signal back to someone who was waiting. Chapter 3 The old blood stirs. The archive room beneath the Hokage Tower was the kind of place that had opinions about being disturbed. It smelled like compressed time, old paper and preservation seals and the particular mustiness of knowledge that hadn't been touched in decades, and the ceiling arrays on the walls hummed at a frequency just below hearing, the kind you felt in your back teeth. Naruto had been down here for 3 hours, which was 2 hours and 50 minutes longer than he'd ever voluntarily spent in any room with this many books. Tsunade had sent him with a list of scroll designations and a lantern and the specific expression she wore when she was giving someone a task that was genuinely important but also wanted to see what they'd do with it. Kurenai, who managed the archive on rotation, had looked at him with wide eyes when he came down the stairs, then looked at the fire moving quietly in his peripheral vision, and then very professionally pretended she was looking at something else entirely. The scrolls Tsunade wanted were in the section marked Pre-Foundation Historical, Restricted, behind a seal that required Hokage-level clearance and, apparently, had also been rigged to detect unknown chakra natures, because when Naruto reached for the latch it sparked and then went still, and then opened by itself, which had never happened before according to Kurenai's increasingly expressive face. The seal recognized the binding, Ryuketsu said, not smugly, just informatively. Some of the old wards were written to. They knew what to do if this happened. Someone planned for this? Naruto asked, pulling scrolls from the shelf. Someone hoped. There's a difference. A pause. The first Dragon-Jinchuriki king built certain things into the world before he died. Contingencies. He was thorough. What was his name? Kane. Ryuketsu said it the way you say the name of someone you watched die. He built walls, wrote wards, left instructions in places he calculated might survive. He didn't know the Covenant would move as fast as they did. He thought he had more time. Naruto carried the scrolls to the reading table and spread the first one. The writing was old, not the flowing modern script he'd learned in the academy, but something older and more angular, the kind that came before standardization, when every village had its own way of shaping letters. There were seal diagrams he didn't recognize and margin notes in 3 different hands, later readers adding their own observations across centuries like sediment. He read, and Ryuketsu translated what the language was too archaic for, and Kurama occasionally interjected with contextual history that the fox had either witnessed or absorbed from centuries of observation, and the 3 of them worked through it together in the lantern light in the way that was starting to feel, if Naruto was honest, less like an unusual situation and more like the normal texture of his mind. The picture that assembled was not simple. The Dragon-Jinchuriki kings were not accidents. That was the first thing. The primordial dragons, 7 of them at the beginning, dwindling over millennia, had each carried within their fire the capacity for the binding, but they were choosy in a way that didn't seem to have rules until you looked at the pattern. Every king had come from a moment of genuine extremity. Not just danger, extremity. The kind of moment where a person was pushing against the wall of what was possible with everything they had and still coming up short. The dragon fire didn't seek power. It sought the specific quality of someone who refused to stop being themselves under pressure that should have changed them. The second thing was the covenant. The Draconis covenant had not always been what it was now. In the earliest records it was something almost noble. A group of scholars and warriors who had studied dragons, lost people they loved to dragon-related catastrophe, and decided that the boundary between human and dragon should be maintained for everyone's safety. 3 of the earliest recorded Dragon-Jinchuriki kings had been unstable, the fire overwhelming human minds that weren't built to hold it, producing entities that were neither the person nor the dragon but something broken between the two. Those early kings had been dangerous. People had died. The Covenant's founding grief was real. But somewhere across the centuries, Naruto couldn't find exactly where, some moment not documented or maybe deliberately erased, the grief had curdled into doctrine. The 3 unstable early kings had become, in the Covenant's internal history, proof that all bindings were inherently wrong. The later kings, Kane, the woman who ran for 40 years, the boy with the smile, those kings hadn't been unstable. The records made that clear. They had been, by any measurable standard, exactly what the binding was supposed to produce, something that protected rather than destroyed. The Covenant had killed them anyway. Because by then it wasn't about safety anymore. It was about order. About the conviction that some forms of power simply should not exist, that the world was correct in the shape it had, that a human carrying dragon fire in their bones was a category violation that needed correcting regardless of who that human happened to be. They are afraid, Ryuketsu said, reading Naruto's silence correctly. They have always been afraid. Fear calcified over generations becomes doctrine, and doctrine becomes violence, and the people doing the violence stop asking themselves whether the fear was ever warranted to begin with. The three early ones, Naruto said. The unstable ones. What went wrong for them? They fought the fire. Said simply. They received the binding in moments of extremity, as you did. But when it was over, when the danger that prompted the binding had passed, they tried to put it down. To contain it. To go back to being what they were before. A pause that felt like weight. You cannot carry a river by building a smaller riverbed. The fire expanded to fill what they were, and they refused to expand with it. The conflict, the rejection, created the instability. Naruto thought about this. You chose the right moment, didn't you? You didn't just pick someone who was losing. You picked someone who wouldn't fight you. I picked someone who had already learned to share himself, Ryuketsu said. Most people are a single thing. You have never been a single thing. You have always been, you, and Kurama, and the village in your chest, and everyone you've ever carried. You have been practicing this for your entire life. Something warm in it. You were not a coincidence. He told you this himself, Kurama said, from his usual place, which had shifted lately, felt less like a separate room and more like a hallway with an open door. Before the binding. You weren't listening hard enough. I was a bit busy at the time, Naruto said. There was a guy trying to put the moon on everyone. He rolled up the last scroll and sat back, and in the silence he could feel the fire moving through him with the steady patience it always had now, like weather that had decided to live inside him and found the accommodation satisfactory. 3 kings before him. All dead. He thought about Cain, who had built contingencies and run out of time. About the woman, the scrolls never gave her name, which felt like its own kind of violence, who had spent 40 years running and never resting. About the boy with the smile. He felt something that was not quite anger and not quite grief but was built from the same materials. What was her name, he said. The woman who ran. A long pause. Tomo, Ryuketsu said. She disliked being recorded. She thought documentation was how they tracked her. She may have been right. And the boy. His name was Rei. No hesitation. He was 16. He had the fire for 9 months. He burned brighter than any of them. The quality of Ryuketsu's voice had changed. I chose him. Of the 7 of us, I chose him. And I was sealed before I could, I was sealed before he died, and I felt it from below the earth, and the voice stopped. Gathered itself. He was the reason I nearly let the fire go out entirely. He was the reason I almost chose not to choose again. The room was very quiet. What changed your mind? Naruto said gently. You fell off a cliff once, Ryuketsu said, at age 8, trying to steal vegetables from a merchant's cart, and the look on your face when you hit the ground was so profoundly resigned that I laughed for the first time in decades. A pause. I had been watching this world from below for a very long time. You were funny. And brave in a way that had no idea it was brave. And lonely in a way that kept choosing community anyway. Another pause. Rei was magnificent. You are something more enduring. Magnificence burns fast. You are the kind of thing that outlasts. Naruto didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, I'm going to make sure they remember their names. Cain, Tomo, Rei. He stood up, gathering the scrolls. That's not nothing. No, Ryuketsu agreed. It isn't. He was halfway up the archive stairs when he heard Kakashi's voice from above, not urgent, but clipped in the way that meant something is happening and I am deciding how alarming to sound about it. He took the stairs 2 at a time. The courier was a young chunin named Hiroshi who was trying very hard to look composed about the fact that he was delivering a message to someone who was quietly on fire. He handed the sealed note to Kakashi and then looked at the wall above Naruto's shoulder and maintained that position with admirable professional focus. Kakashi read it, folded it, and handed it to Naruto. 3 confirmed Covenant agents inside the Fire Country border. Not the scouts. Different signatures, different movement pattern, direct approach vector. ETA, 6 hours. Incident at the Hyuga compound. Minor. Hinata. Naruto was moving before he'd finished reading. The Hyuga compound was 15 minutes from the tower at a normal pace. He covered it in 4, not running. Running implied effort, and the fire had made effort into something he had to consciously remember to perform. He moved the way the fire moved, which was direct and without ceremony, and people who saw him coming stepped aside with the instinct of people encountering something that knows exactly where it's going. The compound gates were open. Niji was standing outside them with his arms crossed and an expression that sat precisely between composed and furious, which for a Hyuga was the equivalent of screaming. "She's fine," Niji said, before Naruto could ask. "She is genuinely fine. I want to establish that first." "What happened?" "Someone entered through the east wall. Not a standard entry, no physical breach, so they bypassed the standard guards. Chakra-based approach, very precise. They reached the inner courtyard." Niji's jaw was tight. "They left something. A message." "Where's Hinata?" "Inside. With my uncle." He paused, and something moved in his face. "She was the one who caught the entry signature. Activated the inner seals herself. The intruder didn't get anywhere near her. She's competent, Naruto. I know she is." He met Niji's eyes. "I know. I just need to see her." Niji studied him for a moment. Then he stepped aside. Which, from Niji, was its own kind of statement. Hinata was in the inner courtyard, standing with Hayashi and 2 other senior Hyuga, all of them looking at a small object on the stone floor. She looked up when Naruto came through, and her expression did the specific thing it did when she was deciding whether to be relieved or exasperated and landing somewhere between. "I'm fine," she said. "I know," he said, and stopped beside her and looked at the object on the stone. It was a coin. Old, extremely old, the kind of old where the metal had taken on a quality beyond wear, something that looked almost biological, like it had become part of the earth it had lain in. On one face, the image was clear despite the age, a dragon coiled around a human figure, the dragon's jaws open, the human figure's hands raised. On the other face, 7 marks in a circle, 6 of them crossed out. 1 remaining. "Covenant," Naruto said. "Without question," Hayashi said. He was looking at Naruto with the Hyuga Elder's particular brand of assessment, not hostile, but thorough and without sentimentality. "They know the connection between my daughter and you. They chose this location deliberately. They wanted me to know they could reach her," Naruto said. "They wanted you to be afraid," Hayashi said. Naruto looked at the coin for a long moment. He felt the fire move, not a flare, nothing dramatic, just a slow and certain deepening of temperature, the way a fire responds when you add fuel with intention. "That's not what they got," he said. He picked up the coin. It was cold, which was strange, everything near him ran warm now, materials absorbing the ambient heat of the fire. But the coin was cold, deliberately, specifically cold, with a chill that wasn't temperature but intent. Someone had laid a seal on it. A tracking seal, he realized, not tracking the coin's location, but tracking who held it. Registering the chakra signature of whoever touched it and sending that information back to its originator. He felt the seal activate when his fingers closed around it. Felt it try to read him. "Interesting," Ryuketsu said. The fire moved into the coin, gently. Not destroying the seal, examining it. Naruto had never had this kind of precision with Kurama's chakra. The fox's power was magnificent, but it was a hammer, not a scalpel. This was different. This was fire that had been burning since before jutsu had names, and it read the covenant seal the way an expert reads handwriting, quickly, completely, understanding not just what it said but how it was made and who had made it. He got a chakra signature, distinctive and controlled. A direction, north and slightly west, a significant distance. A name that wasn't quite a name, more like an identifier, a sound and a quality, the echo of a mind that was precise and grieving and absolutely certain. He let the seal finish sending what it thought it was sending, and then he closed his fist and the seal dissolved, quietly, and the coin became just a coin. I know where he is, Naruto said. Roughly. About 200 kilometers northwest. Everyone in the courtyard was looking at him. He sent scouts first, Naruto continued, still looking at the coin, working it out as he spoke. Then his direct agents. Now this. He's building a picture, not of my power, he would have gotten that from the scout reports. He's building a picture of what I care about. He looked at Hinata. He wanted to know if you matter to me. And now he knows, Hinata said, without any particular distress. Now he knows, Naruto agreed. He said it without apology, because there was nothing to apologize for. The fact that she mattered was not a weakness he was embarrassed about. It was just a fact about the shape of his life. What Kagehane had miscalculated was the difference between a vulnerability and a reason. The agents, Naruto said, turning to Hayashi. The ones coming in on direct approach. They'll arrive in about 5 hours now. I need to know if you're willing to let this courtyard be used. Hayashi blinked. Whatever he'd been expecting, it wasn't that. As what? A meeting room, Naruto said. Niji, from the gate behind him, you want to receive them. I want to have a conversation, Naruto said. Covenant agents who come in on direct approach in broad daylight are not an assault team. They're messengers. He set the coin down on the stone. And I want to send a message back. The 5 hours moved with the specific texture of strategic waiting, purposeful and tight, the kind of time that doesn't pass so much as accumulate. Naruto spent an hour with Kakashi and Yamato and Shikamaru, who had materialized from somewhere with shadows under his eyes and a mind that was already 6 moves ahead of every move anyone else was considering. Shikamaru listened to everything, asked 4 precise questions, made 1 observation that reframed the entire situation, and then went to sleep against the wall, which was his version of I've done my part, someone else execute it. The observation was this: the Covenant doesn't move on Dragon-Jinchuriki kings immediately. They surveil first. They prepare. The 3 historical kings all died because the Covenant had time to build an understanding of how the fire worked, find its limits, develop a counter. The only advantage you have right now is that they've never encountered a binding like yours. Don't give them time to study it. You're saying go to them, Kakashi said. I'm saying don't let them set the pace. Shikamaru closed his eyes. Receiving their messengers in a location you control is the right call. Let them know from the start that this isn't going to be what they're used to. Then he went to sleep. Naruto stared at him for 3 seconds and then absorbed this as operational wisdom and moved on. Sasuke arrived at hour 3. He came into the Hyuga courtyard like he'd been invited, which he hadn't, because Sasuke operated on the assumption that anything happening within a certain radius of Naruto was his operational concern, whether anyone had formalized that or not. He looked at the setup, the courtyard cleared, the positions Naruto had chosen, the particular quality of prepared stillness, and made a single assessment. You're putting yourself at the center, Sasuke said. It's my courtyard, Naruto said. It's the Hyuga's courtyard. They lent it. Sasuke looked at Hayashi, who looked at Sasuke, and something passed between them in the compressed language of people who had each independently decided to extend a limited professional tolerance to the other. You're not hiding support, Sasuke said. No. Everyone who's here is visible. I want them to see exactly what they're dealing with. Which is? Me. With friends. Naruto looked at him. Are you one of them? It was a direct question, asked directly, no ceremony around it. Sasuke looked at him with those dark eyes and then looked away and then looked back, and whatever the internal process was he didn't share it. Where do you need me, he said. Naruto pointed to the 3 o'clock position. Sasuke went there without commentary. The agents came exactly when Naruto expected them, which told him the tracking seal had delivered what they'd intended and they'd adjusted their timeline accordingly. There were 3 of them, 2 men and a woman, dressed in traveling clothes rather than anything that announced affiliation, which was itself an announcement. Covenant field agents dressed civilian because they spent their lives moving through places where being known as Covenant was dangerous. They had the particular economy of movement that came from very long careers of very dangerous work. They came to the gate. Niji let them in. The lead agent was a man in his 50s with a shaved head and eyes that took in the entire courtyard in a single sweep, cataloging positions and faces with the speed of long practice. He stopped 6 feet inside the gate and looked at Naruto. Naruto was sitting on the courtyard center step, not standing, not posturing, just sitting, relaxed, elbows on his knees. The fire was visible today, not the shimmer of suppression but actual presence, moving across his shoulders and arms in slow patterns. The wings weren't extended, but their shape was clear, even folded. He looked exactly like what he was, someone who had nothing to perform and nowhere to be that was more important than here. The lead agent said, Uzumaki Naruto. That's me. We represent an organization that has a vested interest in the event that occurred 3 days ago at the Valley of the End. I know what you represent, Naruto said. Your boss sent us a coin. He held it up briefly. Clever seal. I liked the engineering. Little invasive, but technically impressive. The agent's eyes moved to the coin and then back to Naruto, and something in them recalibrated. Lord Kagehane sends his regards. He sends a tracking device and you call that regards, Sasuke said, from the 3 o'clock position. He wasn't threatening, exactly. He was just present in the very direct way Sasuke was present when he decided something was his business. The lead agent looked at Sasuke. Back at Naruto. You should know that Lord Kagehane is not your enemy. Your organization has killed every Dragon-Jinchuriki king in recorded history, Naruto said conversationally. Help me understand the distinction. The agent's expression didn't change in any large way, but something shifted in it, something that could have been discomfort. The situations that required those interventions were different from this one, Naruto finished. Because you want to make the case that those kings were dangerous and I might not be. He leaned forward slightly, and the fire brightened at the motion, easy and unconcerned. Go ahead. Make it. The agent looked at him for a long moment. Lord Kagehane would like to meet you, he said. In person. Neutral location, his choice and yours. No conflict. He believes there is a conversation worth having before any further steps are taken. Any further steps, Kakashi said, mildly, from somewhere to the left. He means before they decide whether to try to kill me, Naruto said, which was honest enough that several people in the courtyard made small involuntary sounds. And he wants to look me in the eye first. The agent said nothing, which was confirmation. Okay, Naruto said. Everyone looked at him. I'll meet him, Naruto continued. His choice of location. No conflict. He stood up, and the fire stood with him, and the lead agent took a half step back without meaning to, which was the most informative thing that had happened in the last 5 minutes. Tell him I'll come alone if he comes alone. Tell him I'm not afraid of him. He tilted his head. And tell him I know about Kane and Tomo and Rei. Tell him I know their names. See how he reacts to that. The agents exchanged a look. Brief, controlled, but there. We'll convey the message, the lead agent said. Good. Naruto stepped down from the stair. There's tea in the side room if you want it before you go. Long travel. Hinata's family has excellent tea. He walked past them toward the courtyard wall, and nobody followed, and nobody tried to stop him, and the three Covenant agents stood in the Hyuga courtyard with the very particular stillness of people who have prepared extensively for a meeting and discovered that every specific thing they prepared for has somehow not come up. Outside the wall, Sasuke fell into step beside him without any preamble. "You know the meeting with Kagehane is a trap," Sasuke said. "Probably. And you're going anyway." "I'm going because it's probably a trap," Naruto said. "He needs to see that doesn't work on me. The threat of danger. I don't change my behavior because of it." He looked ahead at the village, at the late afternoon light on the rooftops. "That's the message. Not the words. The fact that I show up." Sasuke walked in silence for a few steps. "I'm coming with you. I said I'd come alone." "I heard you." "Sasuke, I didn't agree to anything." He looked straight ahead. "I'll be close. You won't see me. Neither will he." "A beat. Probably." Naruto thought about arguing and decided it would take more energy than it was worth, and also that he was privately glad, and those two things together meant the argument was already over. "Fine," he said. "I know," Sasuke said. "I genuinely like him," Ryuketsu said, warmly. "I'm going to start making your existence uncomfortable," Naruto warned. "You can't," Ryuketsu said, unbothered. "You already said so." "You were bluffing." "Was I?" "Yes. You're too kind to commit to sustained discomfort." A fond pause. "That's also why Kagehane will not win." The night came in from the east, the way it always did over Konoha, purpling the sky above the Monument Mountain, softening the village into its nighttime shape. In the archive below the Hokage Tower, the old scrolls lay on the table in the lantern light, Kane's careful handwriting facing up, the instructions and contingencies and hopeful words of a man who had built things to outlast him and had died before he could see whether they worked. Naruto was on the roof of his apartment, eating a bowl of ramen that had gone slightly cold because he'd forgotten to eat it while it was hot, watching the stars appear one by one. The star where Ryuketsu's last fire had gone was easy to find now. He didn't know why. It wasn't actually different from the others, but he always knew which one it was, the way you always know the face of someone you've met in a crowd. He looked at it while he ate and the fire in him moved softly, recognizing it, and from inside his chest something ancient and warm acknowledged the sky with the patience of something that had always been part of it. "Kane would be glad," Ryuketsu said. He built the wards hoping someone would reach them someday. He didn't know who. He just believed. Like a certain idiot who used to write, "Believe it," on everything, Kurama said, which was the first time the fox had volunteered an observation that wasn't strategic or analytical, and Naruto felt the significance of it without making a production of it. "Yeah," Naruto said. "Like that." He finished his ramen. The stars were all out now. The village breathed below him, warm and alive, full of people who were sleeping and working and arguing and laughing and all the specific human business of a place that has decided to be a community. He would go to Kagehane. He would sit across from the man who commanded the organization that had killed every person who had ever stood in his position, and he would look him in the eye, and he would be exactly and completely himself. And whatever Kagehane had built over his lifetime of certainty, Naruto was going to make it ask itself questions. That was the plan. "Simple," Ryuketsu said, approvingly. "Simple is what works," Naruto said. Kane used to say that. Smart guy. He was. A soft pause. "You would have liked each other." Naruto looked at the star one more time, and then looked at his village, and then went inside to actually sleep for the first time in 3 days. The fire kept watch. It was very good at keeping watch. Chapter 4, Crown of Fire. The message came back in 18 hours. A location, the Takigakure borderlands, a decommissioned way station 3 days travel northwest. A time. A single additional line that the lead agent had presumably added on his own initiative, because it had the specific quality of something delivered against better judgment, Lord Kagehane says he knows the names too. Naruto read it standing in the Hokage Tower, Tsunade across the desk from him, Kakashi to his left, Shikamaru awake for once and standing by the window. He's acknowledging the kings, Kakashi said. He's establishing that this isn't his first conversation with the topic, Shikamaru said. He wants Naruto to know he comes prepared. That he's not dismissible. He looked at the message. It's also a peace gesture. Small one. Or it's bait, Tsunade said. It's both, Naruto said, setting the paper down. Everything he does is probably both. That's fine. He looked at Tsunade. I need 3 days to get there. I need Sasuke. Sasuke isn't a Konoha asset you can requisition, Tsunade said dryly. He already decided he's coming. I'm telling you so you know where he is. A beat. Also I need to not have a full ANBU escort that Kagehane scouts will see from a kilometer away and interpret as either fear or aggression. Tsunade looked at him with the expression she reserved for moments when she was about to agree with something she'd prefer to argue about. 2 days preparation. Leave on the 3rd morning. I was going to leave tomorrow. You were going to leave tomorrow underprepared, she said. 2 days. Use them. He used them. The first day was information, Shikamaru walking him through everything the Konoha Intelligence Archive had on the Covenant's field operations, which was thin but consistent. The Covenant operated in small cells, regional, each one largely autonomous, which made them difficult to track and nearly impossible to disrupt at the organizational level. Kagehane was the center, every cell reported to him eventually, through layers of cutouts and dead drops, but his authority was total. The organization was him, functionally. Which means, Shikamaru said, pointing at the map of confirmed Covenant activity over the last decade, if you resolve Kagehane, you don't necessarily resolve the Covenant. The cells will keep operating. But they'll lose direction. They'll fracture. He tapped the map. The question is what resolving Kagehane means. I'm not going to kill him, Naruto said. Shikamaru looked at him with the expression of someone who has already processed this answer and moved past it. I know. I'm asking what you want from him. Specifically. Because walking into that meeting without a specific want is how you end up reactive. Naruto thought about it. About Kane building wards that worked across centuries. About Tomo running for 40 years. About Ray, 16 and burning bright, dying with a smile because he was too stubborn to understand he was losing. I want him to understand the difference, Naruto said. Between what he's afraid of and what I actually am. He met Shikamaru's eyes. He built his life on the premise that Dragon-Jinchuriki kings are a threat that needs eliminating. He watched it fail every time and told himself the failure was the king being too strong, not his premise being wrong. I want him to see the premise. Shikamaru was quiet for a moment. That's harder than killing him. Most things worth doing are harder than the alternative, Naruto said. Shikamaru made a face that acknowledged this was true and irritating. Fine. Then you need to understand his want before you walk in. Because he has one too, and if you don't know what it is, he'll use it as a lever. The second day was different. Naruto was in the training ground at dawn when he found the Covenant's welcome party. He'd felt them from the apartment, 3 signatures, not the same ones as before, moving through the village with the compressed careful movement of people who had trained very hard to be invisible. They weren't invisible to him. The fire-red chakra the way a dog reads scent, not effort, just constant, ambient information. He went to the training ground instead of toward them, and he waited, and they came to him because he'd made himself findable on purpose. There were 4 of them, as it turned out. The 4th had been hanging back, good discipline, using the other 3 as a distraction for the censor he knew he'd be dealing with. They came out of the trees on 3 sides, moving into the training ground's open space, and their coordination was excellent. The spacing was deliberate. This was a team that had done this before, many times, against targets who were faster and stronger than average. But they hadn't done it against this before. The lead one, a woman, early 40s, with the flat eyes of a specialist, raised a hand. "We're not here to fight." "I know," Naruto said. "You're here to test. Kage wants a capability assessment before the meeting. He wants to know what I can actually do before he sits across from me." He looked at each of them in turn. "You picked the training ground because you knew I'd be more comfortable here. Less likely to worry about collateral." The woman's hand was still raised. "We have a proposition." "You have a test," Naruto corrected, pleasantly. "So let's just do the test. It'll be faster. And I need breakfast." The fourth agent, still in the tree line, made the first move, a long-range technique, something that looked like a binding seal launched like a projectile, designed to wrap around a target's chakra coils and slow them. It was very fast and would have been very effective against anything it had been designed to counter. The fire caught it in the air 3 feet from Naruto's face and took it apart at the seam. Not blocked, unraveled, the way you unravel a knot when you understand the threading. The seal's component chakra dispersed harmlessly, and Naruto didn't move. "Okay," he said. "Who's next?" They came together, which was the right call. Individually they had no realistic chance and they knew it, but together, with the precision of a practice team, they had calculated they could gather enough data for a meaningful report. The woman came low, 2 others came from the flanks, the fourth repositioned from the tree line to a new angle. Naruto let them get close. Not out of arrogance, out of curiosity. He wanted to understand what they'd developed, what the Covenant's anti-king techniques looked like in practice. Ryuketsu was reading them as they moved, the fire tracing the edges of their chakra signatures with the same thoroughness it had applied to the tracking seal, and what came back was informative. "Suppression seals," Ryuketsu said. "All 4 of them carry them. The technique compresses a target's chakra coils from the outside, creating a physical restriction. It was designed specifically against the binding. Against Kane." A pause. "It worked on Kane." "Partially. It was enough." The woman reached him and activated the seal in her palm against his forearm. The pressure was real. He felt it, a squeezing, like someone had wrapped something tight around his chakra pathways, and for 2 seconds the fire compressed, the outer layer of the binding pushed inward by something that had been built from hard-won knowledge of how to hurt people like him. Then Kurama moved. Not Ryuketsu. Kurama, who had been patient for 3 days and was apparently done being patient, who had 9 tails and 9 lifetimes of creative fury and who had spent 1,000 years being sealed and did not respond well to the word suppress. The fox's chakra moved into the suppression seal from the inside with the exact amount of force required, not a hammer, because even Kurama had been changed by the fusion, had inherited something of Ryuketsu's precision, and simply rejected it. The seal shattered against his skin like pottery dropped on stone. The woman yanked her hand back. "Tell me something," Naruto said. He wasn't breathing hard. He hadn't moved his feet. "The suppression seals. Did Kage make those himself, or did someone before him?" She stared at him. "The technique is old," he said. "Older than Kage. It was built to counter Kane, which means someone in the Covenant's history sat down with knowledge of a Dragon-Jinchuriki king's chakra structure and reverse engineered a counter. That's serious, dedicated scholarship." He meant it, there was no irony in it. "But it's built around what Kane's binding looked like. And mine is different." The fourth agent came from above, a direct physical strike, switching from techniques to contact, which was an intelligent adaptation in the moment. Naruto sidestepped and caught the agent's wrist on the way past, and the fire moved into the contact point, and what it communicated was simple: I could end this completely, and I'm choosing not to, and I want you to feel the difference between those 2 things. The agent hit the ground softly, wrist intact, chakra coils clear. Naruto stood over him. "Go back to Kage. Tell him the meeting is still on. Tell him the test answered whatever he needed to know." He stepped back and gave the agent space to stand. And tell him the suppression seals won't work on me. Not because I'm stronger than Kane was, though I might be, but because the binding is different. There's a fox in here as well as a dragon, and the fox has had a very long time to learn what rejection means. Eloquently put, Kurama said, with the tone of someone who is pleased and refuses to fully show it. The 4 agents collected themselves and left. Nobody was seriously hurt. The woman paused at the tree line and looked back, and Naruto looked back, and what moved between them wasn't hostility. It was the specific acknowledgement of 2 people who understand the shape of the game they're playing and have, for a moment, both looked at the board clearly. Then she was gone. Naruto stood in the training ground and felt the morning come fully up, the sun warming the grass and the fire warming him from inside, and he thought, Kagehane is going to be in that way station having read this report and knowing his standard playbook doesn't apply, and having to make choices about what that means. Good. Make choices. Think. Ask yourself questions. That was the whole point. He left Konoha on the 3rd morning as Tsunade had insisted, with Sasuke supposedly 600 meters behind him and actually, as far as Naruto could tell, about 40, which was Sasuke's version of respecting an agreement while technically honoring its terms. The road northwest was beautiful in the way that roads through fire country always were, the specific rich green of a place that had decided to be alive and committed to it fully, the trees old enough to have personalities, the light coming through in long angled bars that moved with the wind. Naruto had traveled this land enough times that it felt like a second body, something he wore over the first, familiar in all its textures. The fire was different out here. Less contained. In the village it was always slightly modulated, not suppressed, but considerate, the way you speak at a lower volume indoors. Out on the open road it breathed more freely, and Naruto felt the difference in his chest, a kind of expansion, like a held breath let go. You like being outside, Ryuketsu observed, on the 2nd day, when they'd left the main road and taken a narrower track through higher country. Always have, Naruto said. He was keeping the pace at a steady travel speed, fast, but conserving. The village is home. But outside is, more honest, Ryuketsu offered. Yeah. He looked at the sky, which was enormous up here, high country sky with clouds that meant something was developing to the north. Ryuketsu. The way station. Whatever Kagehane has set up there, it will be a trap, Ryuketsu said. In the sense that there will be contingencies. Prepared positions. The meeting will be genuine, he does want to speak to you, but he will not have come without preparations for the conversation going badly. How many people? Difficult to say at this distance. The Covenant is careful. I would not count on fewer than 20 within response distance. Kurama, I could find them when we're closer. 10 kilometers, I can run a perimeter read without being detected. Do that, Naruto said. But don't do anything about what you find. I'm a fox, not an idiot, Kurama said. The distinction is often subtle, Ryuketsu said. The fox's response to this was something Naruto decided not to repeat. The way station appeared on the afternoon of the 3rd day, exactly where the message had indicated, a long, low building that had once served the courier routes between fire and water country, now decommissioned, its cedar wood gone silver with weathering, surrounded by a clearing that was open enough to be comfortable and open enough that nobody could approach it from any direction without being seen. Kagehane had chosen well. An experienced man. Naruto walked across the clearing from the south. He didn't slow down, didn't vary his pace, didn't do anything that would suggest he was uncertain about walking forward. The fire moved around him in its natural state, visible, present, not performed. The door opened before he reached it. The man who came out was not what he'd assembled from the intelligence profiles and Ryuketsu's descriptions. Those had given him an impression of someone severe and institutional. What he got was a man in his mid-60s who looked like he'd spent 50 of those years outdoors, weathered face, careful eyes, the kind of physical economy that came from a lifetime of genuine rather than theatrical training. He was neither tall nor imposing. He wore plain traveling clothes. He had the look of a carpenter or a teacher. He stood in the waystation doorway and looked at Naruto for a long moment. "You're younger than I expected," Kagehane said. "You're not," Naruto said, which was the honest answer. Something moved in the old man's face. "Not offense. Come inside." The waystation's interior was simple: a table, 2 chairs, a fire and the stone hearth that Naruto's fire acknowledged the way you acknowledge a distant relation. There was tea, already made, 2 cups. The deliberate preparation of a man who understood that the rituals of hospitality had structural purpose in a meeting like this. Naruto sat. Took the tea without hesitation. Kagehane sat across from him and looked at the fire that was moving, quietly, across Naruto's hands and shoulders. His expression was complicated in the way that all honest expressions are complicated, more than one thing happening at once, none of them hidden. "You know what I've done," Kagehane said. "I know what the Covenant has done," Naruto said. "You're the Covenant." "Yes." "So yes. I know." Kagehane looked at his tea. "The 3 kings. You know their names. Kane. Tomo. Rei." He said them plainly. The old man closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had shifted in them, not softened, but moved, like furniture rearranged in a room so the space was the same but the feel of it was different. "Where did you find those?" "The archives. Ryuketsu." At the dragon's name, something happened in Kagehane's face that was entirely unguarded and entirely unexpected. It wasn't hatred. It was something closer to longing. "He's really in there," the old man said. "The last one." "The last one," Naruto confirmed. "I thought he was dead." Kagehane looked at Naruto's hands, at the fire. "When the valley readings came in, I thought it was simply a new binding, residual fire from a lesser lineage, not the primordial." He was quiet for a moment. "That changes things." "Tell me how," Naruto said. "The early kings," Kagehane said, and his voice settled into something that sounded like it had been rehearsed many times in private, but not because he was performing, because this was the thing he lived in, the center of his life, the thing he'd built everything around. "The unstable ones. You know about them. They fought the fire. Refused to expand. Tore themselves apart. 3 of them. 3 separate incidents across 200 years. Each one killed dozens of civilians before they were stopped." Kagehane wrapped both hands around his teacup. "My ancestor was there for the 3rd one. The 3rd unstable king. His entire family, 7 people, died in a single night." He looked at Naruto directly. "That's where the Covenant began. With a man who survived the night his family didn't and decided it should never happen again." Naruto held his gaze. "And then it kept happening. Kings who weren't unstable. Kane. Tomo. Rei. None of them hurt anyone who didn't come for them first." "No," Kagehane said. "And the Covenant killed them anyway." "Yes." "Why?" The old man was quiet for a long moment. The fire in the hearth popped and settled. Outside, the clearing was still. "Because we had stopped asking whether the fear was warranted," Kagehane said. And the way he said it, the flatness of it, the absence of excuse, told Naruto something important. This was not a man who had never examined his own actions. This was a man who had examined them and not yet found a way to change them. Those were different problems. "He knows," Ryuketsu said, quietly. "He has known for some time. This is not ignorance. Watch carefully." "My son," Kagehane said. And stopped. Naruto waited. "My son found a partial binding 14 years ago. Not a king's binding, a lesser dragon remnant, an echo from a long-dead lineage. He was 19. The old man's hands tightened on the cup. He didn't know what he'd found. He thought it was a chakra anomaly. By the time I understood what had happened to him, he had been carrying it for 8 months. A pause. He was one of the unstable ones. Not because he fought it. Because it was already broken when he found it, corrupted, a fragment without the whole, without the consciousness to guide it. He had no Ryuketsu. He had no Kurama. He had only a piece of dead fire that expanded without direction. He died, Naruto said. I had to stop him. Kagehane's voice didn't break. It stayed level in the way that things stay level when they're being held by will rather than composure. I had to stop my own son. With my own hands. Because the alternative was a village of 800 people. The room was very still. Naruto looked at the old man and felt something that had nothing to do with tactics or strategy, just the plain human weight of what Kagehane was carrying. A grief that had become policy. A wound that had been institutionalized. He understood this better than most people would, because he had spent his life in a village that had done exactly the same thing with its own grief, had taken the terror of the Nine-Tails attack and sealed it into a boy and called it protection. Fear calcified into doctrine. He knew the shape. So you decided to make sure it never happened again, Naruto said. To anyone. Even the stable kings posed a risk, Kagehane said. Not from instability. From the world's response to them. Every king's binding historically destabilized regional power structures. Nations mobilized. Wars were started. Even stable kings died surrounded by conflicts they'd created simply by existing. He looked at Naruto. I have been telling myself that what I was protecting was the world from those consequences. But Rei was 16, Kagehane said. And I have read his last written words, they're in the Covenant's own archive. He wrote them in the last hour before we reached him. He wrote, I know what they're afraid of. I hope someone tells them one day that they were wrong. He set down the teacup. 16 years old. And he wasn't afraid of us. He looked at Naruto. Just like you. I'm not afraid of you, Naruto said. No. But I understand you. He leaned forward slightly, and the fire moved with him. Kagehane. Your ancestors' family died. Your son died. Those aren't nothing. Those are real. The fear that came from them is real. He met the old man's eyes straight. But you've been killing the solution because it looks like the problem. And at some point the doctrine has to answer to the evidence. The evidence, Kagehane repeated. I've been the Dragon-Jinchuriki king for 6 days, Naruto said. In 6 days I ended a war that had been building for decades. I came to this meeting alone when you had 20 people positioned in the woods around this building, Kagehane blinked. And I sat down and drank your tea and told you that you're not my enemy even though you have spent your entire life building an organization whose purpose is to kill me. He held the old man's gaze. What does the evidence say? Kagehane was quiet for a very long time. Outside, without either of them having arranged it, Sasuke appeared at the window, not threatening, just present, leaning against the wall like he was waiting for someone to finish a conversation. He had a piece of dried fruit from somewhere and was eating it with the elaborate disinterest of a man pretending he hadn't been listening from 6 feet away. Kagehane looked at him. Back at Naruto. You said alone. He agreed to come alone, Sasuke said, from outside, helpfully. I made no such agreement. Something moved in Kagehane's face. The something was unexpected. It was close, if not identical, to the kind of amusement that surfaces in people who have been very serious for a very long time and have just encountered something that refuses to take the gravity seriously. You're really not afraid, the old man said. To Naruto. Not accusatory. Just, certain. Like he was confirming something he had suspected from the beginning and is only now willing to state. Not of you, Naruto said. Not of what you've built. Not of what you're capable of. He paused. But I'm afraid of the world you're trying to protect staying smaller than it has to be. That scares me plenty. The meeting lasted 2 more hours. They talked. Not negotiated, Naruto had no terms to impose and Kagehane had no surrender to offer. They talked the way two people talk when they are each in possession of information the other needs and have decided, tentatively, that sharing it is worthwhile. Kagehane talked about the Covenant's regional cells, their capabilities, their doctrine. Naruto talked about the binding, about Kurama, about Ryuketsu, about what the fire actually was and felt like and did. He talked about the first three kings with the specificity of someone who knew them, not as historical cases but as people. When Kagehane heard Naruto say Tomo's name with the same ease as the others, something in him went quiet in a new way. The Covenant erased her name from every record we could reach, the old man said. We thought, if there was no record of her, future kings couldn't take inspiration from her endurance. She ran for 40 years, Naruto said. That's not an inspiration. That's a life that deserved better. He looked at Kagehane directly. She deserved what Ray said in his last hour. She deserved someone who would tell the Covenant they were wrong. When Naruto left the way station, walking back across the clearing in the late gold afternoon, Kagehane stood in the doorway and watched him go, and the 20 Covenant agents in the surrounding woods held perfectly still and waited for a signal that never came. Sasuke fell into step beside him. How bad was it? Sasuke said. Not bad. Naruto looked at the sky. Sad, mostly. Did you get what you came for? Naruto thought about Kagehane's face when he'd said Ray was 16. About the quality of that silence. About a man who had known for some time that his doctrine was wrong and hadn't found the door out of it yet. I planted something, Naruto said. Whether it grows is his choice. And if it doesn't grow, Sasuke said. Naruto was quiet for 3 steps. The fire moved in the evening air, catching the last of the light, turning it into something else. Then we have a conversation of a different kind, he said. But that's not today. Sasuke nodded once. They walked. Behind them, in the way station, Kagehane sat alone at the table with 2 empty teacups and the names of 3 dead kings in the air around him, and something shifted in the architecture of what he'd spent his life building, some load-bearing belief that had held weight for decades settling into a different position, and the man sat very still in the quiet and felt the shift happen and did not, for once, try to stop it. Not yet over. Not even close. But something had moved. On the road south, with the fire country trees closing in overhead like a cathedral, Naruto felt the fire move in his chest and heard Ryuketsu say, quietly, Kane tried to do this once. Before the end. He tried to have this conversation. What happened? Naruto said. They wouldn't meet with him. A long pause. They sent the suppression team instead. Another pause. You are the first king they have ever sat across from and heard. Naruto walked in the growing dark and felt the weight of that. Then he felt something else, lighter, warmer, the specific warmth of a thing that is possible precisely because everything before it was survived. First time for everything, he said. Yes, Ryuketsu agreed. That is, I have found, usually how things begin. Chapter 5, The Weight of Ancient Things. The dream started on the road home. Not nightmares. Something older and stranger than nightmares, more like memories that didn't belong to him, playing in the space behind his eyes while he slept in a roadside inn outside the fire country border. He saw things in the specific unfiltered way of dream knowledge, where you understand the context without being told it, a village on a coast he didn't recognize, burning in the dark. A woman running across a rooftop with fire streaming from her hands like a comet tail, her face turned back once over her shoulder, not afraid, just checking whether they were still following. They were. A boy standing in an open field at dawn, writing something in the dirt with his finger, taking his time about it, as though he had all the time he needed and was choosing to use it this way. He woke before sunrise, sat up in the narrow in bed, and felt the fire very still in his chest, very present. Tomo, he said internally. And Ray, Ryuketsu confirmed. I'm sorry. I should have warned you. When the binding deepens, and it is deepening, you've been using it more freely and it is settling further in, the memories come. Not constantly. Not intrusively. But they come. A pause. They were part of me. What was part of me is now part of you. So I'll remember things that happened to people who are dead. You'll remember things that happened to people who were real, Ryuketsu said, with a precision that felt important. There's a difference. Naruto lay back and stared at the ceiling and let that sit with him for a while. Outside, the pre-dawn was doing its slow work, the birds going first, always the birds, the light coming after, tentative and then committed. He could hear Sasuke in the next room, awake already because Sasuke was always awake at this hour, doing whatever Sasuke did at 5 in the morning that he never explained or invited company for. Kane's memories too? Naruto asked. Eventually. Yes. What was he like? A long pause. Not reluctance, consideration. Ryuketsu finding the right words for something he'd been carrying for a very long time. Careful. He thought before he spoke and sometimes thought too long and the moment passed. He built things. He was always building something, the wards, the contingencies, even in the middle of a conflict he would be looking at the walls and thinking about how to make them better. A pause. He was afraid, in a way the others weren't. Not of dying. Afraid of leaving no trace. Of being a story nobody told. He left traces, Naruto said. The ward in the archive opened for me. He built something that worked. I know. Something warm and old in Ryuketsu's voice. I would like him to know that. That's the one problem with being the part of someone that outlasts them. You know things they deserve to know and can't tell them. Naruto didn't have an answer for that. He just let it be the true thing it was. He got up, got dressed, and went downstairs to find breakfast and found Sasuke already at the table with tea and a map and the specific focused expression he wore when he'd identified something he hadn't told anyone yet. Talk, Naruto said, sitting down and stealing a piece of bread from the basket on the table. Sasuke slid the map across without preamble. He'd marked 3 locations with small ink circles, recent additions judging by the dryness of the marks. The Covenant agents we tracked from the valley, the scouts Hinata flagged, and the team in the training ground. I've been mapping their approach vectors. He tapped the map. They all originate from the same general area northwest of us. But the way station where Kagehane met us is southeast of that origin point. Naruto looked at the map. Kagehane isn't at his base. Kagehane came to the meeting from a secondary location, Sasuke said. His actual center of operations is here. He indicated a region in the northern highlands, far border of fire country brushing against the edges of what had once been the land of frost. High elevation. Defensible. Multiple exit routes. He looked at Naruto. He has somewhere between 60 and 100 people there, based on the signal density the scouts were reporting back to. That's not a way station meeting, Naruto said. That's a compound. He didn't come to the meeting from a position of caution, Sasuke said. He came from a position of strength. Whatever you planted in that room, he went back to 60 people who have spent their whole lives in the same doctrine he has. Naruto chewed his bread and looked at the map. He thought about Kagehane's face, the shift, the something moving in the architecture of the old man's certainties. He thought about how long it takes a thing that has been a certain way to become a different thing. How sometimes you can watch it begin and still not know whether it'll finish. He won't move against us while he's thinking, Naruto said. You don't know that. No. But he came to that meeting genuinely. He wasn't running a play, he was actually asking a question. He needs time to live with the answer. And if someone else in his organization doesn't wait for him to finish thinking, Sasuke said. This was the thing Naruto had been avoiding thinking about since the road started this morning, and Sasuke, as usual, had found the exact shape of the avoided thing and placed it on the table without ceremony. Then we deal with that when it happens, Naruto said. It may happen before we get home. I know. Sasuke looked at him for a moment. Then he folded the map and put it away and poured Naruto tea without being asked, because Sasuke's version of caring about someone was almost entirely expressed through practical actions that he performed without acknowledging he was performing them. They ate breakfast. Paid the innkeeper. Left. The road south was 2 days from the inn, moving through country that got progressively more populated, first the outlying settlements, then the larger towns that had grown up along the trade routes, then the approaches to Fire Country's heart where the trees got serious about their size and the air took on the particular quality of a place with a long memory. The fire liked this country. Naruto could feel it responding to the old trees the way it had responded to Ryuketsu's recognition in the valley, not with words, just with warmth. They were 6 hours from Konoha when the signal found them. It was a Konoha standard, a falcon seal messenger, a red band on its leg meaning urgent, not critical. Naruto took the message tube from the bird and read it, and something cold went through him that had nothing to do with temperature. He handed it to Sasuke without a word. Sasuke read it. His expression didn't change, but his hand closed slightly on the paper, and for Sasuke that was the equivalent of someone else's sharp intake of breath. The message was from Neji. 3 lines. Covenant agents. Hyuga compound. East Garden. Hinata. Come fast. Naruto was already moving. He didn't run, running was too slow, and he wasn't running anymore, not since the binding had settled in and given him access to what moving actually meant when you had dragon fire in your bones. He moved the way the fire moved, which was direct and without negotiation, and the road south became something to cover rather than something to travel, and the 6 hours collapsed to something much less than that. Sasuke kept pace, barely, which for Sasuke meant he was genuinely pushing. They hit Konoha's northern gate at a pace that made the gate guard stand up very quickly and then immediately step aside. Naruto didn't slow down at the gate or through the village, and people who saw him coming felt the warmth of the fire from 10 meters away and cleared the path with the instinct of people encountering something that is not threatening them but is absolutely not slowing down for anyone. Shopkeepers, civilians, off-duty shinobi. A corridor opened up through the village's mid-afternoon foot traffic as naturally as water parting around a stone. The Hyuga compound gates were open in the specific way of a place where something had just happened and nobody had gotten around to closing them yet, not damage, just the residual chaos of a crisis in its immediate aftermath. 2 Hyuga guards stood at the entrance looking unsettled in the contained way Hyuga went unsettled, and they both moved when they saw Naruto and one of them said East Garden before he'd finished asking. The East Garden. Hinata was there, and she was upright, which was the first thing, the thing that made the cold in his chest release its grip enough for him to actually assess what he was seeing. Upright, sitting against the garden wall with Neji crouched beside her, with 2 branch family members standing at the garden's edges in ready postures, scanning. She had a medical seal active on her left forearm, one of the Hyuga's own design, and her face was pale in a way that had nothing to do with her usual complexion. Neji looked up when Naruto came through. Something moved in his face that was relief and anger compressed into a single expression, the anger not at Naruto, but at the situation, at whoever had done this, held tightly in check by Neji's formidable self-control. Naruto crossed the garden and crouched in front of Hinata. "Hey," he said. "I'm fine," she said. Automatic, immediate, the reflex response of someone who spent their life being underestimated and had developed the habit of leading with competence. "I know," he said. "Tell me anyway." She looked at him for a moment. The Byakugan wasn't active, which meant she was either conserving chakra or had been told not to use it. He suspected both. 2 of them, she said. They came through the east wall, same method as the first time. They weren't scouts. They weren't messengers. A pause. They were trying to take me. The fire moved. Naruto felt it in his palms, in his chest, not a loss of control, more like a response, a quickening, the way a flame responds to a breath of air. They got the arm, she continued, looking at the medical seal. A binding technique. I broke it, but it disrupted the chakra flow in the coils. She was precise about it, clinical, which was her version of managing something frightening. I'm fine. The disruption will clear in a few hours. Sakura looked at it. She was here already. Niji sent for her before he sent for you. A small pause. He thought you'd want her assessment first. Naruto looked at Niji, who met his eyes steadily. The message in them was clear, I know you. I knew you'd want facts before you decided what to do with your feelings about those facts. Good call, Naruto said. He meant it. He turned back to Hinata and looked at her arm and felt the fire reading the residual signature in the medical seal, the trace of whoever had made the binding technique, and what came back was, not Kagehane, Ryuketsu said, before Naruto had finished the question. Different signature entirely. Younger. Angrier. Someone in his organization who didn't wait for him to finish thinking. Who gave the order, Naruto said. Niji, the agents were alive. Briefly. Hayashi-sama was home. Naruto absorbed this without comment. The picture of Hayashi Hyuga encountering someone who had put a binding technique on his daughter and being briefly forgiving about it was something he chose not to dwell on. Did they give a name? Naruto asked. A title. Field Commander of the Northern Cell. Niji paused. Someone named Yasha. I know Yasha, Ryuketsu said. He has been with the Covenant for 20 years. He is what the doctrine looks like when the grief has burned away and only the certainty remains. He has no son story. He has no founding wound. He simply believes. The way a blade believes in cutting. Kagehane didn't order this, Naruto said. You don't know that, Sasuke said, from behind him. He'd come in quietly, was standing at the garden entrance. His Sharingan was active. He was genuinely reconsidering, Naruto said. And while he was reconsidering, his field commander moved independently. Sasuke looked at the mark on Hinata's arm. Which is worse? He was right. Naruto sat with that for a moment. A leader who had ordered this could be reasoned with, confronted directly, the line drawn clearly. A subordinate who moved without orders was a different problem. It meant the Covenant's consensus was ahead of Kagehane's evolution, meant that whatever Naruto had planted in that way station room had to fight not just one man's lifetime of doctrine but an entire organization's. Hinata had been watching him think. She knew him well enough to read the specific silence. Don't decide anything right now, she said quietly. He looked at her. I wasn't going to. You were. Not accusatory. Just accurate. You were already 3 steps ahead of where we are. You were already at whatever comes next. She looked at him straight with those pale eyes that had always seen him clearly. Stay here for a minute. He breathed out slowly. The fire settled. You scared me, he said, and didn't dress it up or explain it. Something softened in Hinata's face, not the competence, not the steadiness, those stayed, but something around them shifted. I know, she said. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for someone else's actions. I'm apologizing for the feeling, she said. Not the cause. She reached out with her right hand, the unaffected one, and touched the fire where it moved on his forearm. A light contact, deliberate. The fire recognized her the way it had in the garden after the battle, and responded to her without caution, and this time Ryuketsu said nothing at all, which was its own kind of comment. Naruto put his hand over hers and held it there for a moment that wasn't long but was complete. Then he stood up. Niji, he said. Double the internal seals. I want sensorine cycling the perimeter every 2 hours, not 4. No one enters the compound grounds without Hyuga authorization and a chakra verification. He looked around the garden. They'll try again, not here, maybe. They know this location is burned. But they'll try again somewhere. Niji nodded. And you? I have something to do, Naruto said. He found a quiet room in the compound, a meditation room, spare and cool, rice paper screens filtering the afternoon light into soft panels, and he sat down and went inward. Not to talk. To listen. He went to the place in himself where the fire lived, not Kurama's den, which had changed since the binding, the bars gone and the space opened up into something that felt more like a landscape than a cage, but deeper, to where Ryuketsu had settled in like a slow-burning coal at the foundation. He sat with it and felt it and let it feel him, and after a while he said, "Tell me what I need to know about Yasha." "He is thorough," Ryuketsu said. "Patient in a way that resembles wisdom but isn't. He's been waiting for a new king for 8 years, since before the war, since before Madara made his move. He has prepared for this specific contingency since before it became a contingency." A pause. "He has a technique. Not the suppression seals. Something he developed himself. He calls it the draining net. It doesn't suppress the binding, it creates a field that accelerates the fire's consumption, forces it to burn faster than it can regenerate. Against the earlier kings it was theoretical. Against you, would it work against me?" A careful pause. "It would be unpleasant. Whether it would be effective against a binding of this depth and completeness, I don't know. It hasn't been tested." Ryuketsu. "Honestly, I don't believe so. But I could be wrong." Could be wrong was something Naruto had never heard from Ryuketsu, and the fact of it landed with appropriate weight. The dragon was old and certain in the way of very old things, and acknowledging uncertainty was its own kind of flag. "What does the net need to work?" Naruto asked. "What conditions?" "Physical proximity. Within 10 meters. And time, it needs to sustain for at least 40 seconds to reach effective depth. So he needs to get close and keep me still." "Yes. Then he needs a reason to get close," Naruto said, "and a way to keep me still." He opened his eyes and looked at the rice paper screens. "And he used Hinata for one of those things already." He stood up. Kurama, who had been quiet through the inner conversation in the way he went quiet when he was watching carefully rather than commenting, "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Yasha made a tactical mistake," Naruto said. "He tried to use the people I care about to manage me. He thinks that's a lever." "It is a lever," Kurama said. "It is," Naruto agreed. "Just not the kind he thinks." He found Sasuke in the corridor outside, who was standing against the wall in the specific pose that meant he'd been waiting and had been prepared to wait as long as necessary and was not going to mention how long he'd been waiting. "We have a problem that isn't Kagehane," Naruto said. "Field Commander Yasha," Sasuke said. "Niji's people got more out of the agents. He's operating the northern cell independently. Has been for 6 months. Kagehane is nominally still the head of the Covenant, but Yasha has, effectively separated the northern cell's operations. Running his own agenda. Kagehane might not know how far it's gone," Naruto said. "Kagehane might know exactly how far it's gone and be letting it happen," Sasuke said, which was the honest reading of the other possibility. "Yeah," Naruto said. "Yeah, maybe." He looked at the wall for a moment. "Sasuke. What would you do? If you were Kagehane?" Sasuke was quiet. This was a real question and he gave it real consideration. "I'd be watching what Yasha does. Seeing whether he succeeds. Keeping my hands clean while someone else tests whether the doctrine holds." "Or," Naruto said. "Or I'd be horrified and trying to figure out how to stop him without fracturing the organization I've spent my life building." Sasuke paused. "Those are both true at the same time, probably. The man you described isn't simple." "No," Naruto agreed. "He's not. He sent a message to Kagehane that night, not through an agent, not through the formal Covenant channel. He sent it the way you send something when you want it to reach someone personally and not be intercepted by the infrastructure around them. He wrote it himself, short and direct, 'Your northern cell moved on someone who matters to me. I know it wasn't you. I think you know I know. Yasha is going to do something that can't be walked back. If you want the conversation we started to mean anything, you have a small window. Use it. Naruto Uzumaki. He sealed it with a small application of fire, not threatening, not a display, just a mark, the way you put your name on something to establish authorship, and send it north with a trusted courier who knew how to disappear into travel routes. Whether Kagehane received it in time for it to matter was not something Naruto could control. The next 3 days in Konoha had the texture of a storm building offshore, visible on every horizon, moving closer, the specific pressure of something that was absolutely coming, and the only variable was exactly when. The village's sensor network reported increased Covenant activity in the northern highlands. 3 separate cells, previously dormant, had gone active. The northern cell specifically was moving people in coordinated patterns that Shikamaru looked at for 20 minutes and then said, without looking up, "He's building a perimeter. Not around the village. Around you. Around me specifically," Naruto said. "Around wherever you go," Shikamaru said. "He's learned from the training ground. He knows you can read chakra signatures. He's not trying to approach, he's trying to establish a containing field. Large enough that you don't feel it closing until it's already close." He looked up. "It's actually very good strategy." "High praise," Kakashi observed. "It's also strategy one can account for," Shikamaru said, "now that I've identified it. The perimeter has gaps, 3 specific points where the cell coordination doesn't overlap cleanly. Naruto moves through one of those gaps and he's outside the net before it closes." "That assumes I want to be outside the net," Naruto said. Shikamaru looked at him. "You want to be inside it." "I want to find Yasha," Naruto said. "Before he makes the move he's building toward. The perimeter isn't to contain me. It's to protect a central position. He's setting up somewhere he can deploy the draining net with prepared conditions." He looked at the map Shikamaru had built. "He needs a specific site. High elevation, defensible, with a clear 10-meter deployment zone." Shikamaru's eyes moved back to the map. Then to a specific point in the northern highlands, within the region Sasuke had marked as the Covenant's base of operations. "Here," he said, and marked it. "The elevation is right. There are 2 natural formations that would provide cover for his support team while keeping the center clear." "That's also Kagehane's territory," Sasuke said. "Yes," Naruto said. "Which means if you go there, I know." He looked at the mark on the map. "I'm not going in with backup. Not a team." The silence that followed this was the particular kind that precedes an argument everyone knows is already resolved. "Naruto," Kakashi said, in the tone he used when he was about to be more serious than his usual expression suggested. "The moment I come in with a team it becomes a battle," Naruto said. "People die on both sides. The Covenant hardens. Kagehane either commits fully to the doctrine or the organization fractures into something more dangerous." He looked at his teacher. "If I go alone it's a different conversation." "It's not a conversation," Sasuke said. "Yasha isn't interested in conversation." "Maybe not," Naruto said. "But Kagehane might be there." He looked at the map. "This is his territory. If Yasha is moving this openly in Kagehane's own ground, Kagehane either sanctioned it or he's about to be confronted with the fact that his organization has left him behind. And if Kagehane has left himself behind," Sakura said, from where she'd been standing by the window, quiet through the whole discussion, arms crossed. "If the conversation you had with him didn't change anything and this is all exactly what it looks like." Naruto looked at her. "Then it's a fight," he said simply. "But it's a fight I can win alone without any of you in the middle of it. That's the difference." Sakura looked at him for a long moment with that specific green-eyed assessment that had always cut through every layer of bravado he'd ever tried to deploy. Then she said, "Don't get hit by the net." "Working on that." "I'm serious. If the technique works the way it sounds, I know," he said. "I'll be careful." She made a face that was "I know what you're careful" looks like and didn't push further, which was its own kind of trust. He left at dawn the next day, alone, moving northwest, the fire easy in his chest and the sky going from black to dark blue to the specific pale gold of early morning that Naruto had always thought of as the sky's first draft. The wings were out, not in the full deployment they'd had at the valley, but present, the dark gold fire shapes moving with the wind of his passage, light but there. Ryuketsu, he said, as the village fell behind him. Yes. Kane tried to do this. Went alone to find the Covenant before they could build their trap. Yes. They sent the suppression team. Yes. The difference is the meeting happened this time, Naruto said. Something went into Kagehane that wasn't there before. Yes, Ryuketsu said. I believe that. I believe it genuinely. A pause. I also believed in Rei. The weight of that sat with him for several miles. Believing in people isn't the problem, Naruto said eventually. The problem is when you let the possibility of being wrong stop you from believing in the first place. Kane would have said that too, Ryuketsu said. Then Kane was right about more than the wards, Naruto said. He felt the dragon go quiet in the way that wasn't absence but fullness, the way very old things go quiet when they encounter something that needs no addition. And the fire burned steady and warm in the morning cold, and the trees of Fire Country fell away behind him, and the highlands opened up ahead, pale and wide and holding whatever was coming with the indifferent patience of high places that have seen many things come and none of them last. The Covenant compound was exactly where Shikamaru had marked. Naruto felt it from 2 kilometers away, not the suppression seals, not the draining net, but the accumulated chakra signatures of 60-plus people in concentrated position, the specific density of a place that has been inhabited with serious purpose for a long time. He felt Kagehane in there, distinctive, that controlled and grieving signature. He felt Yasha too, harder to find, deliberately obscured, but there, the sharpness of a mind that was watching all approaches. He felt the net. It was already deployed. Yasha had seen him coming, or had prepared it on the assumption that he would come, which was either prescience or very thorough preparation and was, in any case, functionally the same thing. The field was larger than Ryuketsu had described. Yasha had expanded the technique since its theoretical conception, and it covered nearly 50 meters of the approach to the compound's main entrance. Naruto stood outside it and looked at it. The net was invisible to the physical eye but clear to the fire, a shimmering field of compressed chakra that wanted to eat fire the way a drought eats water. Well, he said. Yes, Ryuketsu said. Here's a thought. I'm listening. The net is designed to accelerate the fire's consumption. Force it to burn faster than it can regenerate. So it needs the fire to behave the way fire behaves, it needs fuel. He looked at the field. What happens if there's nothing to burn? A long pause. You mean pull the fire in entirely? Leave nothing on the surface for the net to reach. I mean walk through a 50-meter field of something designed to drain me while carrying nothing it can drain. That is, Ryuketsu paused, and Naruto could feel the dragon working through it. That would require pulling every external manifestation of the binding back to the absolute core. Invisible, contained. The way it was in the very first hours after the binding, before you started using it freely. Another pause. You'd be walking through that field without the fire's active protection. With only your own body and Kurama's baseline healing. Would the net hurt me without the fire to react with? It would, yes, it would be uncomfortable. The field is not passive. But without the fire to accelerate, it would be, the dragon paused again. A headache. Rather than the sea drowning you. Good enough, Naruto said. You're going to walk into a prepared ambush site with 60 hostile agents in a compound ahead of you and your primary power deliberately suppressed. Yeah. Kane would not have done this, Ryuketsu said. No. He would have thought of 17 reasons why it was too dangerous. A pause. Then he would have done it anyway and been frightened the whole way through. I'm not frightened, Naruto said. I know, Ryuketsu said. That's still remarkable to me. Every time. He pulled the fire in. It was like, Like gathering a large thing into a small space, folding warmth into warmth until there was no external signature, just the deep core that was him and Kurama and Ryuketsu at the absolute center of the binding, invisible, quiet, breathing. The wings vanished. The glow vanished. The ambient warmth that had been following him like a second skin for 2 weeks pulled inward and held. He looked like himself. Just himself. A 17-year-old with untidy blonde hair and scuffed sandals, standing in the Highland morning with his hands in his pockets. He walked into the net. The field was unpleasant, Ryuketsu had been right about that. It pressed against his skin like static, sought the edges of his chakra coils with the persistent attention of something that had been built to find what it was looking for, and it found the deep seal of the binding and pushed against it with the specific cold insistence of an instrument deployed without its expected resistance. His head ached. His palms prickled. A headache built behind his eyes with the patient efficiency of a very well-designed technique. He walked through it in 32 seconds. Came out the other side. The headache faded. The fire unfolded back into place with a quiet and certain completeness, like a hand unclenching. That worked, Kurama said, with what sounded like genuine surprise. Don't be so shocked, Naruto said. I'm not shocked. I'm acknowledging. Better. He stood in front of the compound gate and looked at it and felt the 60 people inside feel him, the fire suddenly present after what they had presumably tracked as an approach with no signature, which meant they'd all been watching a blank space on their sensor arrays and were now looking at the biggest chakra reading any of them had ever been within 100 meters of. The gate opened. Not an attack. The gate opened, pulled from inside, and in the opening stood Kagehane. Not Yasha. Kagehane. The old man looked at him with an expression that contained several things simultaneously, and the dominant one, the one sitting on top of everything else, was relief. You got my message, Naruto said. Your message arrived 4 hours ago, Kagehane said. I've been managing a situation. Something moved in his jaw. Yasha has been operating independently for longer than I understood. I found the full scope of it this morning. Naruto looked at him. He tried to take Hinata. I know. The words came out like something that tasted bad. That was not sanctioned. I don't offer that as an excuse. I am telling you it was not my order. I know that too, Naruto said. Where is he? Inside. Kagehane stepped back from the gate. He's aware you're here. He's prepared. I know he's prepared, Naruto said, and walked through the gate, and the fire walked with him, and 60 Covenant agents in the compound courtyard felt it arrive and found, individually and collectively, that none of them reached for a weapon. Not because they were told not to. Because the fire came in like weather, present, certain, belonging entirely to itself, and the instinct to reach for something smaller than what you were facing was replaced, in each of them, by the simpler and more honest instinct of a person standing in the presence of something that knows exactly what it is. Yasha was in the center courtyard. He was exactly what Ryuketsu had described, a man in his 40s with a face that had long since let go of doubt, the kind of certainty that had been chosen rather than arrived at and was maintained by continuous effort. He had the net prepared in his hands, a physical focus, a seal array that he held between spread palms, the chakra visibly loaded and ready. He looked at Naruto with the specific quality of someone who had prepared for this encounter and found the preparation sufficient. You walked through the field, he said. Took 32 seconds, Naruto said. Headaches mostly gone. The field was to make you manageable. I noticed that. Yasha's hands moved. The net launched. Naruto let it hit him. Not because he had to. Because he wanted Yasha to understand the difference between hitting something that flinches and hitting something that doesn't, and the only way to communicate that clearly was to stand still and let the technique do its absolute best work. The net wrapped around him, 50 meters compressed into a deployment, the draining technique doing what it had been built to do, reaching for the fire with the cold insistence of a technique that had spent years being refined against every theoretical model of a king's binding that Yasha could construct. The fire let it try. For about 4 seconds, it was genuinely effective. Naruto felt it, the drain, the cold, the pressure. Not catastrophic, not close to the edge of anything alarming, but present and real and functional. Yasha's technique was not a theoretical exercise. It was a genuine achievement of chakra engineering built by someone who took their work seriously. Then Kurama yawned. Not metaphorically. The fox, in the internal landscape of the binding, stretched the way a very large animal stretches, unhurried and enormous, and the chakra coils that the technique needed to grip simply, expanded. Past the net's containment parameters. Past the range of what it had been designed to account for. Kurama's chakra was not the fire's surface layer, it was the architecture beneath, and the architecture was bigger than any counter built on observation of the surface could anticipate. The net dissolved. Not broken, dissolved, the way something dissolves when it encounters conditions it wasn't designed for and has no response to. Yasha stared. You didn't account for the fox, Naruto said. You were building against the dragon's fire. But it's not just dragon fire. It's never been just dragon fire. He tilted his head. That's the thing about my binding. Every model you build of what I am is incomplete, because I'm not one thing. I'm not one thing and I've never been one thing and there is no technique in existence that can be finished because there's nothing here that's finished. Yasha's expression didn't break. What it did was something more interesting, it considered. The certainty shifted slightly, the way a very precisely held thing shifts when the surface it's resting on moves underneath it. You're not afraid, he said, and there was something underneath the flatness now. Something that had been covered by doctrine for 20 years and was looking, just briefly, at the daylight. No, Naruto said. But you are. Not unkind. Just accurate. You've been afraid since before you joined the covenant. You found a place for the fear to live and you called it purpose. I'm not saying that's nothing, purpose is real, even purpose built on fear. But Yasha. He looked at the man straight. The thing you were afraid of is standing in your courtyard and it has not hurt a single person here. What does that tell you? Behind Yasha, in the courtyard, 60 people were very still. Kagehane stood at the gate, watching. Yasha looked at Naruto for a long time. Then he looked down at his hands, the hands that had held the net, that had built the technique, that had spent 20 years preparing for this exact moment, and something moved in them, a fine tremor, barely visible, the physical signature of something structural giving way. It tells me, he said, very slowly, that I have prepared for the wrong question. Not surrender. Not conversion. But a crack in the wall of certainty, a crack of the kind that, once present, cannot be sealed from the inside. Naruto breathed out. Behind him, Kagehane said, stand down, and it moved through the compound courtyard like a current, and 60 people who had been very still became people who were still in a different way, the difference between held breath and resting breath. The fire moved warm in Naruto's chest, patient and certain, and the highland sky above the compound was enormous and blue and full of a morning that was, against the weight of all its prior nights, genuinely new. Chapter 6, King 3 days after the compound, Kagehane came to Konoha. He came alone, which was either trust or statement or both, and he came through the front gate in his plain traveling clothes with nothing to announce him, and the gate guards would have stopped him and processed him like any civilian visitor if Naruto hadn't been standing there when he arrived, which was not a coincidence because Naruto had felt him coming from 2 kilometers out. You could have sent word, Naruto said. I could have, Kagehane agreed, and said nothing else about it. Naruto walked him through the village. Not to the Hokage Tower immediately, through the village first, the way you walk someone through a place you want them to understand rather than just visit. The morning market was in full swing along the main avenue, and it was loud and chaotic and alive in the specific way of a community that had survived a great deal and decided to be cheerful about still existing. A fruit vendor was arguing with a customer about the correct price of persimmons. 3 children sprinted between adult legs and nearly took out a cart of earthenware. Somewhere close, someone was frying something that smelled like the best thing in the world. Kagehane walked through it and said nothing, but he looked at everything, and his face did something quiet and complicated that Naruto watched without comment. "How long since you've been in a village?" Naruto asked. "Just walking." "Some years," the old man said. "The covenant keeps you in the field." "The covenant keeps me in the field," he agreed. Something in the phrasing, the acknowledgement of the covenant as a separate force that acted upon him as well as through him, was different from how he'd spoken about it in the way station. More distance in it. The particular distance of a man who has begun to look at his own life as a subject of study. They sat at a ramen stand that Naruto had been eating at since before he could reach the counter without standing on his toes, and the proprietor, who had known Naruto since he was 8 and had strong opinions about everyone Naruto brought to the counter, gave Kagehane a look that was specifically the assessment of a woman who has watched a boy grow up and has adopted as a personal responsibility the vetting of every significant person he introduces her to. Kagehane, who had lived through considerably more threatening scrutiny, ordered miso and bore the assessment with composure. They ate. The fire was quiet around Naruto, not suppressed, just comfortable, the way it always was in the village now, domestic and warm like the hearth it had briefly shared acknowledgement with in that way station room 3 days ago. "Yasha," Naruto said. "Is no longer field commander of the northern cell," Kagehane said. "He's taking time to think." A pause. He asked for it himself. The fact that he asked is, I think, the most unexpected thing that has happened in this entire sequence of events. "He's not the enemy," Naruto said. "He never was. He's a person who built his life on the wrong premise and worked very hard to make it true. You have a generous reading of people who try to drain your fire and abduct the woman you," Kagehane paused. "The woman who matters to you. Generous is what works," Naruto said. "Generous is how you get somewhere different from where you are." Kagehane looked at his ramen bowl. "You sound like you believe that completely." "I do." "The 3 kings believed in things completely too," Kagehane said, not as an attack, as an honest observation. "Cain believed the covenant could be reasoned with. Tomo believed she could outlast us. Ray believed," he stopped. "Ray believed he was right," Naruto said. "And he was." "He was." Kagehane said it simply, without the weight of a man confessing. "Like a fact. He was 16 and he was right and I have carried that for 23 years. He looked up. "I was not covenant leadership then. I was a field operative. I participated in the pursuit." His eyes were direct, holding nothing back. "I want you to know that. I was there." Naruto looked at him. "I know. And you're here now," Naruto said. "Alone. In my village. At my ramen stand." He picked up his chopsticks. "That's not nothing." The proprietor, who had been listening with the professional invisibility of a woman who has heard 10,000 conversations from behind a counter, refilled their water without being asked and moved to the other end of the stand. After ramen they went to the Hokage Tower, and Tsunade received Kagehane with the specific quality of attention she gave to things she had determined were both important and without precedent, complete, unreadable, and deeply alert. She had the 3 pre-foundation scrolls on the desk. She had tea. She had Shikamaru in the corner with a notepad and Kakashi against the wall with his book open to a page he definitely wasn't reading. What happened in that room over the next 4 hours was not a negotiation in the formal sense. It was closer to what happens when 2 bodies of water that have been separated by a dam finally reach the same level and the dam becomes unnecessary, not dramatic, just the slow and inevitable adjustment of things finding their natural state. Kagehane talked about the Covenant's history, its regional distribution, its internal doctrine, with the thoroughness of a man who has decided that transparency is the only remaining useful currency he possesses. He talked about the 3 unstable early kings with the accuracy of a primary source, because the Covenant's archive was the most complete record of those events in existence, and he had read it many times. He talked about the technique library his organization had developed, 40 years of anti-king research, compiled, annotated, the most comprehensive study of the binding in the world. That research, Shikamaru said, from his corner, not looking up from his notepad. All of it was oriented toward counter and suppression. Yes, Kagehane said. Could it be reoriented? A pause. To what purpose? Shikamaru looked up. Understanding. Not countering. Actually understanding what the binding is, how it works, what conditions produce stability versus instability in early kings. He looked at Naruto. You have 3 historical unstable cases and 3 stable ones. That's a dataset. The Covenant has 40 years of research on the stable cases built from the wrong question. If you reframe the question, you get a foundation for understanding what I am, Naruto said. Not with any particular weight on it. Just the practical truth. Kagehane looked at the scrolls on Tsunade's desk. At Naruto. At Shikamaru's notepad. He looked at the room like a man doing genuine accounting, measuring something against something else, and the measuring took long enough that no one interrupted it because everyone in the room understood that it required the space it was taking. The archive, he said finally, is in the compound. Everything. 40 years. He looked at Tsunade directly. I would require assurances of its preservation. Its completeness. It contains the names and histories of people the Covenant treated badly. They deserve to be in the record accurately. A pause. Including Rei's last words. Which should not be in a Covenant archive. They should be somewhere they can be read. Tsunade looked at him for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer, took out a standard treaty document, and slid it across the desk without any ceremony. Start with what you need the assurance to say, she said. We'll work from there. Naruto watched this happen and felt Ryuketsu go very still inside him, not shocked, not overwhelmed, just the specific stillness of something ancient encountering an outcome it had wanted for a very long time and had stopped believing in and then started believing in again and was now watching arrive. Kane, Naruto said internally. Yes, Ryuketsu said. He'd have something to say about this. He'd say he knew it was possible. A long pause, and in the pause were decades of a sealed dragon watching from below the earth and a man building wards for a future he couldn't see. He'd say the wards worked. The wards worked, Naruto agreed. He stood up from his chair at the table's edge, and Tsunade looked at him with the expression that meant she knew exactly what he was about to do and had already decided it was acceptable. I'll be outside, he said. Shikamaru knows what I'd say to everything else. Shikamaru, without looking up, I do. Go. He went. The village in midday was the village at its most itself, full and loud and layered, every stratum of life happening simultaneously, the specific organized chaos of a community with too many people and not enough space and the absolute refusal to be less than entirely alive about it. Naruto walked through it with his hands in his pockets and the fire quiet around him, and people noticed him the way they always did now, some with the new awareness that had been building since the valley, a wondering quality, careful and interested, but mostly they just noticed him the way they always had, the way they'd been noticing him since he was small and too loud and very present. Because he'd always been present and they'd learned a long time ago that this particular presence was a permanent feature of the landscape. An old woman called his name from a second-floor window and threw down a rice cake. He caught it, waved up at her, kept walking. 2 academy students ran past him and one of them pointed and said something to the other that involved the word fire and actually real and they both looked back over their shoulders until they nearly walked into a post. He found Hinata at the river. Not because he'd known she'd be there, or maybe he had known, in the way the fire knew things, the ambient awareness that had been growing into something very specific and very warm whenever he was within range of her. She was sitting on the bank downstream from the bridge, feet tucked under her, looking at the water with the particular quality of thoughtful stillness that was so specifically Hinata that he'd been able to identify it from 50 meters away since they were 12. He sat down beside her and the fire settled immediately, warm and easy, the way it always did near her. How'd it go, she said. Good. He looked at the river. Kagehane's in there with Tsunade. I think they'll work something out. You think? I think because Tsunade would rather make something work than fight something, when making it work is an option. He pulled at a grass stem and turned it over in his fingers. And Kagehane he's done, I think. With what he's been doing. Not because he's beaten or because I'm scary. Because he's tired and he's been right but wrong for a very long time and running out of energy to keep being that. Hinata looked at him sideways. Right but wrong. He was right that the unstable kings were dangerous. He was wrong about what to do about it. He paused. He was right that dragon fire in a human is the most dangerous thing that can exist. He was wrong about dangerous meaning eliminate. He looked at the grass stem. Dangerous just means it matters. Everything that matters is dangerous. That's what makes it matter. She was quiet for a moment. Ryuketsu told you something like that. Ryuketsu said I was the kind of thing that outlasts, Naruto said. That's different. That's more, focused on me specifically. You are, though, she said. You are the kind of thing that outlasts. She said it simply, without performance, in the tone she used for things she was completely certain of. You always have been. He looked at her. She was looking at the river, the afternoon light on her face, the specific quality of someone who has said the true thing and is entirely comfortable with it sitting in the air between them, not needing a response or a retreat or a change of subject to make it manageable. He thought about what Ryuketsu had said in the archive room. You were not a coincidence. He thought about the fire finding her easy from the very first moment, the way it had moved toward her without direction, the way water moves toward the lowest point not because it's falling but because it's arrived. He thought about the memorial garden and her hand on the fire and the quality of that moment, and the compound yard and the message she'd given him about the scouts before anyone else had thought to, and every other specific moment that added up to a person who had been choosing to be present in his life, quietly, consistently, without announcement, for a very long time. Hinata, he said. I'm going to say something. You say things all the time. Not like this. He turned toward her. She turned toward him at the same moment, which was either coincidence or the same instinct moving in both of them simultaneously. Her pale eyes were steady and open and completely, absolutely unafraid of whatever he was about to say. I think, he said, that I've been figuring out who I am for my whole life. And I keep figuring out that who I am includes, more than I thought. It keeps, expanding. He looked at his hands, the fire moving in them. First it was just me. Then it was me and Kurama. Then the village. Then Sasuke, and Team 7, and everyone I've carried and been carried by. He looked at her. And then the fire, and Ryuketsu, and the kings who came before me. And it keeps getting bigger. More. He paused. And you are in every version. Every time I find a new version of who I am, you're already in it. You were there before I knew to look. She held his gaze. I'm in love with you, he said, and the fire moved warmly between his words, and it wasn't a performance or a declaration or a thesis, it was the same quality as every other true thing he'd said today. Just a fact. A piece of the shape of the world. Hinata breathed in slowly. Her hands had gone still in her lap. The river moved past them with its usual indifference and the afternoon held steady and warm. I know, she said. He blinked. I've known for a while, she said, and something happened in her expression that was warm and private, the smile of someone who has been patient about something important and has just been told they were right to be patient. I was waiting for you to catch up. He stopped. How long have you known? Since the valley, she said. When you came over the ridge. She looked at him. The fire was around you and you were laughing at something Sakura said, and I thought, there he is. Not the Dragon-Jinchuriki king or the Jinchuriki or the hero or any of the things that you are. Just you. She reached out and put her hand over the fire on his forearm the way she had in the garden, easy and certain. There he is. I am not, Ryuketsu said, in the private space behind Naruto's thoughts, going to say anything. That's a first, Kurama said. Even I, the dragon said, with great dignity, have timing. Naruto put his hand over Hinata's and they sat by the river while the afternoon moved around them, and the fire was warm between their hands, and the village breathed and moved behind them, and it was the most ordinary and most extraordinary moment of his life simultaneously. The word came down from the Hokage Tower 2 hours later, carried by a very harried-looking Chunin who found Naruto at the river and appeared deeply uncertain about interrupting whatever was happening but had clearly been told by someone, Shikamaru's handwriting on the message, no question, that it was important. The message said, "Come when you're ready. We have a framework. Bring your good judgment." Your good judgment, Hinata read, and looked at him. That's Shikamaru's version of, please come soon, Naruto said. His version of now is, come immediately. His version of urgent is, the building is on fire. When you're ready, means he's handling it but would prefer the situation to involve me. Then you should go, she said. He stood. She stood beside him, and he looked at her for a moment in the way you look at something you've just named precisely for the first time, finding the new shape of it. Come with me, he said. She tilted her head slightly. Not for any official reason, he said. Just, come. He held out his hand. She took it. The Hokage Tower at late afternoon had the quality of a place where something real had been decided, not the exhausted aftermath of conflict, but the particular aliveness of a room where something that had been impossible 2 weeks ago had become the foundation for something that might actually hold. Tsunade was at her desk with the treaty framework spread out before her, red pen in hand, making final notes. Kagehane sat across from her with the posture of a man who has put down something very heavy and is still adjusting to the absence of its weight. Shikamaru had filled a notepad and started a second. Kakashi was on his third reread of his book, which meant he was paying very close attention and maintaining the performance of not doing so. Sasuke was there, which was not surprising, leaning against the wall near the window, arms crossed. He looked at Naruto and Hinata, at their joined hands, and something crossed his face, not surprise, exactly. More the expression of someone whose internal model of the world has just been confirmed in a way they're allowing themselves to briefly acknowledge before returning to other business. He looked away. Back at the window. The business of acknowledging things being apparently complete. Sit down, Tsunade said, without looking up from her notes. Or stand. I don't care. We're almost done. Naruto leaned against the wall beside Sasuke, and Hinata stood with him, and neither of them said anything to each other, and it was the same easy silence as the river, just relocated. The framework is this, Shikamaru said, flipping back to the first notepad. The covenant becomes, not dissolved, because dissolution without structure leaves cells operating on old doctrine indefinitely, but reformed. Restructured. The research archive comes to Konoha under joint custody. The regional cells receive updated operational parameters over 6 months, Kagehane personally delivering. The doctrine of elimination is formally retired. He looked at his notes. In exchange, Konoha provides, Naruto. Naruto looked at him. Access, Shikamaru said. Not permanent residence. Not control. But access. The Covenant scholars who want to understand the binding are given the opportunity to study it with your cooperation. The research that spent 40 years asking the wrong question gets redirected to the right one. He paused. Kagehane's proposal, actually. I thought it was worth including. Naruto looked at Kagehane. The old man met his eyes. You said the evidence should speak, he said. Evidence requires study. The people in my organization who are capable of changing their minds need, a reason that isn't just, because the king said so. They need to understand. A pause. I'm asking you to be understood. Are you comfortable with this? Ryuketsu asked quietly. Naruto thought about it. Being studied. Being examined. Being the subject of research conducted by people who had spent decades trying to develop ways to kill him. Letting them look and ask and learn, trusting that what they found would be the evidence that changed the question rather than simply refining the counter. It was not, as Shikamaru had noted, without risk. But risk without purpose was just caution wearing bravado's clothes, and this had purpose in every direction. Yeah, he said. Okay. Tsunade looked up from the framework. That's your considered opinion? Yeah, okay. It's my considered opinion, he said. I just don't have more syllables for it right now. Tsunade made a sound that was not quite a laugh but occupied the same territory, and signed the bottom of the first page with the particular authority of a Hokage who has decided something is done. The document that came out of that room was not called a treaty, because treaties were between nations and this was between a man and an organization and a village and a history that was older than any of their institutions. It was called, in the end, a Charter of Understanding, which was Shikamaru's phrasing and everybody's preference because it said what it was accurately and without excess. Kage signed it in the late afternoon light with a hand that was steady, and when he set the pen down he looked at it for a long moment with the expression of a man completing something that has been a long time reaching its completion, and then he looked at Naruto, and what was in his face was not exactly peace, too much history for peace, too much weight, too many names, but something that pointed in peace's direction. Something that had chosen, finally, to face the right way. The research archive, Kage said. There are documents in it about the three kings. Personal histories, recovered writings, accounts from people who knew them. He paused. Rei's things are there. Some of Tomo's, she was careful about records, but there's more than she intended to leave. Kane's architectural notes on the wards. He looked at Naruto. I think those should be, separate from the technical research. Kept differently. Kept like their peoples, Naruto said. Yes. I'll make sure. Outside the tower, the village was going into its evening, the specific golden hour transition of a place that has decided this particular day is worth marking, even though no official declaration has been made, because communities feel their own significant moments the way living things feel weather. The market vendors were taking their time closing up. People were sitting on steps and talking in the manner of people who are not ready to go inside yet. Someone, somewhere, was playing something on a stringed instrument that drifted over the rooftops and found the edges of the evening and made them softer. Naruto stood on the tower steps and felt the fire move in him with the full ease it had been building toward since the valley, not new anymore, just his, the way Kurama had become his, the way the village had become his, the way every extension of himself that he'd initially encountered as foreign and frightening had become in time simply the truer shape of what he was. Sasuke came out behind him and stood at his shoulder. It's going to be complicated, Sasuke said. The charter. The cells reforming. The research access. Someone in the covenant will break from it. Probably multiple someones. This doesn't end cleanly. Nothing ends cleanly, Naruto said. Things just move to the next stage. There will be other Yeshus, Sasuke said. In other organizations. Other doctrines. Other people with long-held convictions about what you are and what to do about it. Yeah. You know that. I've known that since the night Ryuketsu gave me the fire, Naruto said. I've known it since I was 5 years old and the village looked at me like something that needed managing. He looked at the street below, at the people moving through their evening, at a place that had once looked at him exactly that way and had, over years and proximity and stubborn insistence on being loved, come to look at him differently. Didn't stop then. Not going to stop now. Sasuke was quiet. Then, what does it feel like? Being the, whatever the title is. Dragon-Jinchuriki King, Naruto said. That. Ask me something harder, Naruto said. I've been the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails my whole life. I've been the kid nobody wanted for most of it. I've been a genin, a chunin never technically, a war hero, the person who punched a god that one time. He watched the evening settle over the village. This is just the next version of the same thing. Being what you are even when the world finds it inconvenient. Sasuke made the sound that was his version of laughing, small, brief, genuine. The god was not impressed with being punched, just for the record. He was at the end, Naruto said. They always are at the end. Modest, Ryuketsu observed. Accurate, Kurama corrected. Kakashi appeared at the doorway behind them with his book and his expression of mild universal amusement. The daimyo's office sent a preliminary inquiry about the valley incident 30 minutes ago, he said. They've had seismograph reports from 6 locations, censorine testimony from 4 villages, and apparently a story from an old woman in Tanzaku who says she saw a dragon rise from the earth and go into the sky. She's right, Naruto said. She is, Kakashi agreed. Which means the rest of the world is approximately 10 days behind where Konoha is, which is the only window you have to get ahead of it. He looked at Naruto over his book. The daimyo is going to want a meeting. The other kage are going to want meetings. Several of them are going to be worried in the way that leads to mobilization if the worry isn't managed early. I know, Naruto said. You're not worried about that either, Kakashi observed. Should I be? Kakashi closed his book, which was rare enough that Naruto actually registered it. His teacher looked at him, really looked, the way he occasionally did, with the one eye that had never stopped seeing exactly what it was looking at with complete honesty. No, he said. I don't think you should be. A pause. I've been your teacher for a long time. I've watched you become a lot of things. This is the first time I've looked at what you've become and not had a single reservation about what you'll do with it. He opened his book again. That's the whole review. Don't ask me to repeat it. Naruto looked at his teacher for a moment and felt something that had nothing to do with fire, just the plain human warmth of a person who has been seen clearly by someone who sees clearly, and found to be enough. Thanks, Kakashi-sensei, he said. Don't mention it. Literally. I'll deny it. Hinata found him after that, on the roof of the tower rather than the steps. She'd known somehow that he'd moved up, found him by the same instinct he used to find her. They sat with their legs over the roof edge and the whole village spread below them in its evening lights, and the fire was visible around him now in the dark gold and quiet, the wings not extended but their shape present the way a shadow is present even in low light. What happens next, she said. Meetings, he said. A lot of meetings. The daimyo. The other kage. Probably the covenant sells one at a time. He looked at the stars coming in. At some point I have to figure out what being the Dragon-Jinchuriki king means practically. Not the power part. The responsibility part. Cain built things. He thought about what the binding was supposed to do in the world. He paused. I should think about that. You're already thinking about it, she said. Yeah. He looked at the star where Ryuketsu had gone, easy to find, always easy to find. Ryuketsu said there were 3 before me. All 3 died. But each one left something. Cain left the wards. Tomo left, I don't know yet, the archive will tell us. Ray left his last words. He was quiet for a moment. What I leave is going to be different. I'm not planning to leave it anytime soon. But when I do, I want it to be something that keeps working after. Like the wards, Hinata said. Like the wards, he agreed. Things that are still helping people 1,000 years later when nobody even knows my name. She turned to look at him. People will know your name. Not what I mean. He turned to look back at her. I mean, the help matters more than the credit. The ward matters more than Cain's signature on it. He held her gaze. You know that. You've always known that. You helped people your whole life without requiring anyone to notice. Something in her expression went soft and certain. You noticed, she said. Yeah, he said. I noticed. He reached out and tucked a strand of dark hair back from her face, and the fire moved with the motion the way it always moved with things that mattered to him, not dramatic, not demonstrative, just there, acknowledging. I'm going to keep noticing. She leaned forward and kissed him. Simple and warm, the way certain things are that have been moving toward their natural conclusion for a long time and arrive without drama because they always belonged there. The fire bloomed once, gently, warm gold in the dark above the village, the way fire responds when the person carrying it is completely and entirely content, and then settled back down. Well, Ryuketsu said, from very far inside, in the tone of someone trying to be restrained about something. Don't, Kurama said. I know what you're simply. Don't. The boy deserves, the boy is fine. The boy is doing beautifully. Leave him alone. A pause. Then, with enormous dignity, I am very happy for him. We are both very happy for him, Kurama admitted, in the tone of someone who would deny having said this if asked. The fox has feelings, Ryuketsu said, warmly. The fox, Kurama said, with great precision, has informed opinions about outcomes that are statistically favorable. It is not the same thing. Naruto pulled back and looked at Hinata and she looked back at him and then they both looked at the village and said nothing because there was nothing that needed saying. Below them, the village breathed. The lights burned. The old mountain with its carved faces, for Hokage watching the approach roads with the patient permanence of stone, held its usual position against the sky, and the fifth face, the one that had been added and had aged a little in the moonlight, looked out over the village it had died protecting with the expression Naruto had always thought was wisdom and now understood was something simpler. Stubbornness. The same thing it had always been. He looked at the carved face of his father, and felt the fire in him, Kurama's fire and Ryuketsu's fire and his own fire, all the same fire now, and felt Hinata beside him, and felt the village below him, and felt Kane and Tomo and Rei in the specific way you feel people who lived and paid something forward without knowing who would collect it, and he thought, here is what was paid for. Right here. This exact thing. The second Kage meeting request arrived the next morning. The daimyo's formal inquiry the morning after that. 2 covenant cells sent communication through Kagehane indicating willingness to receive updated parameters. 1 cell, in the far northwest, went dark, which Shikamaru noted was expected, and had already accounted for in the contingency planning, and was not a crisis, merely a task. Naruto attended the first Kage meeting via messenger bird, not in person, because Tsunade pointed out correctly that showing up in person to a meeting where 3 of the 5 Kage were already anxious would consolidate that anxiety into action before anyone had said anything substantive. The letter he sent instead was short and plain and said, with characteristic Naruto precision, I know you've heard about the valley. Yes, it's real. No, it's not a threat to any of you. Yes, I'm still Naruto Uzumaki from the Hidden Leaf Village. Come to Konoha when you're ready and I'll answer everything you want to know. Bring your best researchers if you want, the Covenant's archive is going to be accessible and it has 40 years of notes on the binding that are more thorough than anything in your own records. I'm not hiding from anyone. Come and look. The Tsuchikage, who was old enough to have seen many things and was not easily impressed, read the letter twice, set it down, and said to his aide, book the travel. The Mizukage sent back a single line, we'll be there in 2 weeks. Save us decent accommodation. The Reikage sent back 3 lines, 2 of which were the word what in various configurations, and the third of which was a date. The Kazekage sent back, I'll come alone. Gaara. Naruto smiled at that one and sent back, bring Temari and Kankuro. It's been a while. The days that followed had the texture of a foundation being laid, not dramatic, not resolved, but the slow and genuine work of building something that intended to hold. The Covenant archive arrived in sections, carefully transported, and the Konoha research team that Shikamaru assembled, 3 archivists, Sakura, and a censorine named Inoue who had a gift for chakra nature analysis, began the enormous task of reframing 40 years of questions. Yasha sent a message from wherever he'd gone to think. It was 4 words. When can I come? Naruto wrote back 2 words. Anytime. Kagehane, who saw both messages, allowed himself the specific private expression of a man whose internal accounting has finally come out in the right direction after a long time in the red. Naruto trained in the mornings, because the fire was still deepening and there were things about its full range he hadn't tested and intended to understand before the situation required him to use things he didn't fully know. He trained with Sasuke, who had shifted from his previous mode of barely tolerated rival who is also my best friend into something that had no clean label but functioned like partnership. They fought and tested and pushed and discovered together what the new power could do, and what Sasuke's Rinnegan and Sharingan saw in the fire gave Naruto information no one else could provide, and what the fire showed the Sharingan changed how Sasuke understood the visual information he'd been processing. His whole life. Something genuine was built in those sessions. Not deliberately. Just through the persistent application of two people taking each other seriously. In the evenings he was usually with Hinata, or with the team, or both, the specific comfortable overlap of a life that had found its people and was allowing itself to simply exist in their company. He told her about the dreams, Tomo's comet tail fire, Ray writing in the dirt, Kane studying walls, and she listened the way she listened to things that mattered, complete and present, and sometimes she asked questions that made him see the memories differently, from angles he hadn't accessed alone. Ray was writing something, he said one evening, replaying the dream. In the dirt. I couldn't read it, dream logic, you know how the words go blurry. He paused. But the feeling of it. He knew they were coming. He had, an hour, maybe less. And he was writing. What kind of writing, she said. Not frantic. Not a message or a cry for help. Something deliberate. He thought about it. Like he was making a record. He wrote his last words in the dirt, Hinata said, very quietly. And the Covenant preserved them. In the archive. She looked at him. He knew they would. He wrote where they would find them and read them, because he wanted them to read it. Naruto was silent for a long moment. He wrote it for them, he said. Not for himself. For the people who were coming to kill him. He felt the fire move with the enormity of this, the 16-year-old in an open field, alone, with everything coming for him, choosing to spend his last hour in communication rather than defense. He was still trying to reach them. Yes, Ryuketsu said, and his voice carried the full weight of 23 years of carrying that. He was the most stubborn of all of them. He was still trying to reach them at the end. Naruto pressed his hands flat against his knees and felt the fire and felt the grief and felt the thing underneath the grief that was fiercer and more durable. Then we finish what he started, he said. The archive. The research. The charter. All of it. He looked at the star. We finish it. The night the Kage arrived, all 5 of them, an unprecedented gathering outside wartime, drawn by a letter that said come and look with the calm certainty of someone who had nothing to hide, Naruto stood at Konoha's gate in the early evening and watched them come up the road. 5 leaders. 5 villages. 5 different relationships with a world that had just gotten more complicated. The fire was fully present around him, not suppressed, not modulated, just present the way it was in the training ground in the open air, breathing freely. The wings were visible, the dark gold shapes sweeping back from his shoulders in the evening light, not threatening, not displayed for effect, just there because this was what he was and there was no reason to be anything else. Gaara saw him first from the road and stopped walking for exactly 1 second, and in that second his face did the specific thing it did when he encountered something that moved him deeply and was simultaneously trying to catalog it analytically. Then he kept walking, and when he reached the gate he looked at Naruto with pale green eyes that had seen quite a lot and said, the reports undersold it. They usually do, Naruto said. You're all right. More than. Gaara looked at him for a moment longer with the quality of his truest attention, the attention of someone who had their own experience of carrying something ancient and powerful and had their own history of the world treating that carrying as a problem to be managed. Something passed between them that didn't need language, the specific recognition of one person who has been a container for something enormous and turned it into something else, for another. Then Gaara said, Temari wants the good accommodation the Mizukage was promised. I told her there would be competition. She said to tell you that you owe her from the sandstorm incident 3 years ago and to please not make her collect. She gets the East Wing room, Naruto said immediately, and tell her we're even. The Raikage came through the gate like he always came through spaces, which was as though the space had been specifically designed for him and was lucky to be used for this purpose. He looked at the fire, at the wings, at Naruto's face, and performed the rapid internal recalibration of a man who has determined that the situation requires him to update multiple operating assumptions. Uzumaki, he said. Raikage-sama, Naruto said. You're the Dragon-Jinchuriki king. Yes. And you're still, he stopped. Started again. You're still Uzumaki Naruto. Always, Naruto said. The Raikage considered this. Looked at the wings. Looked at the fire. Looked at Naruto's face, which was the same face it had always been, open and present and completely unbothered by being looked at, and made some decision that expressed itself as a single short nod, the kind that meant I have completed my assessment and reached a conclusion I can work with. They went in. The meeting that happened that night in the Hokage Tower was not the meeting any of the Kage had prepared for, because they'd prepared for a problem and found a person. Naruto answered every question, about the binding, about the valley, about Ryuketsu, about the covenant and the charter and the archive, with the same directness he brought to everything, without performance, without managing their reactions, simply giving them the truth in the order it was useful and letting them do what they wanted with it. Shikamaru sat in the corner with his notepad, having long since given up on the pretense of sleeping, and occasionally provided supplementary information with the precise economy of a man who had anticipated every question and prepared the answer in advance. Tsunade presided with the authority of someone who has already decided how this ends and is simply waiting for everyone else to arrive at the same conclusion. Around midnight, when the formal questions had been asked and answered and the room had moved into the more comfortable territory of people who have completed their official business and are now just talking, that Tsuchikage said, with the particular forthrightness of a very old man who has decided that his age entitles him to say the unpolished version of things, the 3 historical kings were killed. You're not dead. What's different? Everyone in the room already knew the answer to this. But that Tsuchikage was asking it as a formal statement, a request for the explicit record. Naruto thought about Kane and his wards. About Tomo running through dark streets with fire streaming behind her. About Rei in an open field, riding in the dirt for people who were coming to kill him. About a faction whose founding grief was real, building doctrine on the wrong question, getting the answer wrong for centuries, and then, maybe beginning to turn toward the right question. The people who were afraid of me, Naruto said, finally sat across from me. He looked at the table. And I didn't let them be afraid in peace. I made them see what they were actually afraid of. He looked up. Which wasn't the fire. It was the same thing everyone is afraid of when they look at something that doesn't fit their model of the world. They were afraid of not understanding it. He paused. So I let them understand it. The room was quiet. And the ones who won't understand it, the Kazekage said. Gaara. His tone was measured and direct. There will be some. There will be some, Naruto agreed. And when they come for me, they'll find that the fire is older than whatever they've prepared and faster than their contingencies and, he looked at Gaara with a small, genuine expression that was not quite a smile and was entirely confident. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I've been doing this longer than the Dragon-Jinchuriki king thing. I know how to handle people who come for me. Gaara held his gaze for a moment and then, quietly, with the dignity of someone who does things that matter rarely enough that each one lands fully, he smiled. It was very small. It didn't matter. It was the right answer to the right moment, and the room felt it. After the meeting, after the Kage had been shown to their accommodations and the tower had gone to its late-night quiet, Naruto sat on the roof alone, or nearly alone, because Ryuketsu and Kurama were never absent, but alone in the way that meant no other person's presence, just the village below and the sky above and the fire in between. Ryuketsu, he said. Yes. Are you still dying? A pause. The specific quality of a pause that is genuinely considering something. No. I was dying for a very long time. What I am now is, not what I was before the sealing, and not what I was in the last centuries of it. I am what I am inside you, which is something I didn't have a name for until it happened. Another pause. I am alive in the way that things inside a living person are alive. Different from before. Not less. Is it okay, Naruto asked. Being here. I chose here, Ryuketsu said. I chose it completely. Every version of okay that exists, this is. And then, in the tone that was the dragon's equivalent of the warmest possible thing said in the driest possible way, you're a very good host. Better than Kane, who worried constantly. Better than Tomo, who never slept. Better than Rei, a pause, and in it was the whole weight of what Rei had been and what had been done to him, held gently. Better than Rei, who was extraordinary but had 9 months. You have, a different quality to the pause now. Something opening. You have all the time you choose to take. Yeah, Naruto said. We do. Below him, the village breathed. The fire breathed. The star where Ryuketsu had gone was visible in the east, patient and constant, the last light of a dragon who had outlasted his own ending by choosing the right person to carry it forward. Naruto looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at the village, at the lights in the windows, the late workers, the families, the people who had been afraid of him once and had chosen differently, the people who had chosen him before he'd done anything to deserve it, the people who had grown up alongside him and the people who had watched him grow, the whole complicated, warm, imperfect, alive thing, and he felt it in his chest the way he always had, the feeling that had kept him vertical at 12 and kept him fighting at 17 and would keep him, he suspected, going in every direction that mattered for a very long time. The fire moved in him. Patient. Complete. His. He was Naruto Uzumaki. He was the Dragon-Jinchuriki king. He had a fox who'd been part of him longer than he could remember, a dragon who had waited beneath the world for the right person, a village of people who had chosen him before he deserved it and continued to choose him after, and friends who would show up uninvited to his diplomatic meetings and steal his dried fruit and stand at his 3 o'clock position when he needed them there. He had a girl who'd known before he did. He had names to remember, and words that still worked, and an archive of 40 years of wrong questions waiting to be asked differently, and 5 Kage who had come up the road tonight with their concerns and left with something closer to understanding, and a world that was deciding what to do with all of this. He was not afraid. He was not hiding. He was exactly, completely, entirely himself, and himself had turned out to be, in the end, more than anyone had expected and precisely what the moment required. The fire bloomed once, warm and full, over the village in the night. And then it settled. And stayed.